I think the Reds are a juggernaut, and this is a big fit for them.
Okay.
I love what the Reds are doing.
I'm with you. I
think
wouldn't
this
call
club
them.
is dangerous.
I don't know if I call them juggernauts, but I think they're better than they were last year. And given that nobody has really kind of grabbed any headlines in that division yet, outside the Cubs poaching Craig Counsell.
So you've got this flexibility without being weighed down with a big contract again.
Right.
And I think this is their window.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Some big news in the world of Major League Baseball yesterday. I don't know where else we would start today, Alex. The Reds have officially announced the signing of Frankie Montas.
Nope, try it again.
Montas?
Montas.
Okay, him. That name.
It.
That is the individual that the Reds have officially announced as their newest addition to the staff. No, we're not talking Dylan Cease, not Logan Gilbert, not Tyler Glass. Now, none of those fools are going to Cincinnati.
Oh.
It is Frankie leading the front end of that rotation, a man that barely can stay healthy, has a shoulder that is attached by toothpicks and bubblegum, and it's going to work out for the Reds. There's no way this one goes poorly.
Hashtag juggernaut.
According to MLB Network, specifically Harold Reynolds, that's a juggernaut over there in Cincinnati. Alex, I guess my question to you is this, in all seriousness. Is the rest of the division now chasing the Reds? Are they the team to beat? Because I'm looking around this division, man, and I'm not totally sure who the team to beat, so to speak, is right now. Would you put them in that category?
I'd put the Red Birds as the team to beat. Huh?
Sure.
That hesitation was that hesitation on purpose?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that's
Honestly,
fair.
no. If you want to make the argument that they're in the front and everybody in the NL Central's chasing them, fine. If you want to make the argument that the Cardinals are in front and everybody's chasing them, also fine. Because I think they're the exact same team. I think the Brewers, the Cubs, the Pirates are all worse than those two teams. And those are the two teams, as Harold Reynolds likes to call them, are the juggernauts of the NL Central. I don't even know if we could use the phrase juggernauts of the NL Central.
I had to look up the definition of juggernaut because I thought maybe I didn't know what it meant.
No, I think you're spot on.
No, I don't think Harold Reynolds knew what it meant because that's not a damn juggernaut in Cincinnati. I don't think there's a team really to beat in the NL Central, even looking at Central standards, and those are very much diminished. It feels a lot like the AL Central from last year, where it is, you look at it and you go, yeah, is there really a good team in there? Like, who's chasing who? Nobody really knows. That's the way I feel about the NL Central, because had the Reds gotten better, sure, but it's just like the Cardinals, where it's like, yeah, if you did like anything, you got better from last year's squad. Like, they haven't added a difference maker into the rotation. They added Nick Martinez and Frankie, who now has a hopefully better shoulder. No, they haven't gotten better. Pagan's like a fly ball pitcher in a small ballpark, by the way. I don't think they're a juggernaut. I think they've gotten better, but they're definitely not the team to chase.
Yeah.
I think they have, because they've added at least
In a
like
meaningful
stability.
way?
And they've got younger players that are coming up.
They haven't gotten better in a meaningful way, but I don't think the Cardinals have necessarily gotten better in that much of a meaningful way either. I don't think there's a team to like highlight and say, this is the team to beat in the NL Central right now.
I think this division is terrible right now.
It sucks. Let's just be honest.
The Chicago
juggernaut.
Cubs have added one significant thing since the end of the last season, and it's the manager. And I didn't think their manager was the problem this year. Now, I like what they did there. I thought it was a really smart move. And I've heard a lot of people, Alex, say something to the effects of, well, why do you make that move if you're not then going to go invest? Because it's cheap. Guys, they made the move to invest in their manager and pay it an extra, $5 million? Think about what that is in Major League Baseball terms. Like, we're talking about basically adding a utility infielder. That's what they spent to upgrade at the managerial position. Now, was he worth that money? Time will tell. But I don't think that was just a play for 2024. I think that's a long-term investment in Craig Counsell. I think the Cubs eventually will be pretty damn good. I just don't think this is the year. Right now, they're still missing Marcus Stroman in their rotation and have done nothing to replace him. They're still missing a Cody Bellinger-sized hole in that lineup. And guys, if not for Cody Bellinger, that offense was not particularly good this past year. They got MVP caliber performances out of Cody Bellinger for like 3 months. He fell off. The offense fell off. Guess what? They missed the playoffs as a result. And right now, he ain't on the team. And if they do bring him back, it's not going to be Cody Bellinger that was making a 1 year, $15, $18 million deal. It's going to be Cody Bellinger making a $200 million contract with that team now. So I don't think the Cubs are the team to beat. I certainly do not think the Milwaukee Brewers are the team to beat, where one of their big-time starters, is out for the season. The other one is gone. The other one, I have no idea if he's going to be there past July 1st, much less July 31st. So we are looking basically at the Reds or the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals maybe are slightly improved from the team that we thought they were going to be a year ago. Not the team they actually were, but the team at this point in the 2023 calendar year that we thought they were going to be. I guess the same is true of the Reds. I mean, this was a team that about midway through last season, we all looked at with the youth and we're like, damn, man, they are super fun. But when you're as young as they are, there's growing pains that are natural to take place. And I don't think they're ready to just go out there and become a juggernaut a year later. They've got serious questions in the rotation, despite what they've added. And their lineup is so incredibly young. I expect some significant slumps, just like we saw from them a year ago. This division's terrible, man. It's horrible.
It's going to be fun to talk about which Central is going to be the worst, because on the other side in the American League, it's also trash. You got the Minnesota Twins and then everybody else who is going to be jockeying for second place.
And the Twins are actively trying to sell off pieces in their division. It's baffling. I do think that the Cardinals and Reds are kind of similar when you look at the rosters, but I think the difference for the Cardinals, and I think I heard you mention this while I was off talking about the Pistons and their long losing streak at the time, is they just didn't. The Reds don't have that veteran presence anymore to teach them how to win with their lineup guys. And at least when I look at the Cardinals, you still got Goldie, you got Arenado. Now you can question their clutchness in the postseason, but those guys know what it takes to win in the regular season and get through the grind of 162 games. Because I think offensively, you could look at the Reds lineup, you could look at the Cardinals and kind of debate which one you think is better. You could look at the pitching staff and go, Hunter Green's a 1, Sonny Gray, if he's not a 1, he's a 1B. And it's very much arguable. And then you look at what the rest of those rotations are and you go, ew. And then you look at the bullpens and you go, all right, there's some guys I like in that pen, but they're nothing that's great. It's not a dominant pen like the Braves have. They're very similar on paper, and I think they're both like 85 win teams right now, 85, 87 win type teams. But where I think the Cardinals get that edge is that veteran experience that they have that the Reds just don't have in that lineup right now.
And just to be honest, I like Jordan Walker better than I like any of the young players on the Reds. And this is not a shot against Elliot De La Cruz or any of those guys. I like their young talent. They have a lot of it. But Jordan Walker is potentially a special player. The Reds' young players are all very good. And we got out a little bit over our skis with the Elliot De La Cruz love last year. Elliot De La Cruz is a super exciting player. And I'm not sure I can remember a player that profiled like him in recent years. Maybe the closest thing would be like, he's essentially Ronald Acuna Jr. If Ronald Acuna Jr. was like 60% as good as he actually is, that's probably the comparison that you could say for Ellie. But he plays in the middle infield, so there's that part of it as well. So he's an exciting young player, but his actual production last year did not match the hype of what he was supposed to be and what he was very early on in his career with the Reds. Meanwhile, Jordan Walker, the production matched the hype, man. He was seriously questionable in the outfield, but by the end of the season, I even think that improved in a significant way. So I think the Cardinals have the best of the young players that are available. They have like the only 2 veterans that are in this group, this mix. I think the Reds have the best starter of the 2 teams.
Agreed.
They might have the best reliever of the 2 teams. But other than that, man, like it's debatable going one way or the other. And I think you can make a pretty strong argument that right now the Cardinals have the better overall roster than the Reds do. And they play in a ballpark that I just trust them more.
Is some of it, too, the way that Cincinnati ended the season compared to the Cardinals?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's part of it why a lot of people are looking at Cincinnati calling them the quote-unquote juggernaut. It's because down the stretch, they were actually pushing for a playoff spot for the longest time, whereas the Cardinals kind of fell to the wayside going into that offseason.
I think you're right, but what's weird about that is, like, we talk about, like, they were pushing for playoffs. Guys, they collapsed in the second half. And why? Because there was front office malpractice done where they didn't add starting pitching. Like, they should almost be crushed and not even be talked about as...
We know all about that.
True. They should not be talked about as a juggernaut, a huge, powerful, and overwhelming force or institution. That's right, I looked it up just to confirm it.
Definition in front of them.
They can't be a juggernaut when they collapse in the second half. and they're losing. And again, Joey Votto is not the Joey Votto of old, but he was a veteran presence that still could play a little bit on that team.
But let me play devil's advocate here. It's a young group that you kind of expect to collapse down the stretch because they're not used to it.
They've done nothing to change that mix.
And Brian Price, it's not like this was the first time I've watched Brian Price be at the helm, by the way, to see a team collapse. He's done it multiple times.
He's not their manager any longer.
Or sorry, not Brian Price. I was thinking of...
Brian Price is like the mid-2010s.
Sorry, I'm thinking of David Bell. That's who I'm thinking of. Sorry.
David Bell. Our guy Brian Price comes on regularly.
Brian, I love you, man. I'm sorry.
Rubbing Brian Price's name through the dirt.
He's a pitching coach again somewhere.
Somebody on the text line
Bring
said,
him here.
guys, and this is the segment that is sponsored by the Cardinals. So if you think this is Cardinal worship, I don't know what you're listening to right now. We're telling you that the Cardinals are in a division that might be won by a team that wins 85 games next year. Like, that's what this segment is really about. It's not about the Cardinals, it's not about the Cubs, not about the Reds, it's about all of them. And the nonsense that is taking place within this division right now. Somebody on the text line also mentioned, I think this was from the 618, guys, if the National League put all of the teams into a blender and instead of it just being the divisions, you had to actually be one of the top 6 or 7 teams in the NL to make the postseason.
NHL standings.
Nobody would make it out of this division. And I think that's probably true. I don't think this division is going to have somebody that's in the top 5 of the National League next year, at least as currently projected. And that's why the Cardinals can get away with what they're doing right now. That doesn't mean it's right. I don't like it. I think they need to go out there and add multiple pieces to this bullpen. I think they need to add somebody that can project to either be a 1 or a 2 with Sonny Gray in the rotation. But when you look around the division and you see, okay, so the Reds are bringing in Frankie Montas, Nick Martinez, Emilio Pagan, and Candelario, and that's their big-time additions to the team. Okay.
Well, what are our big-time additions to the team?
I think they're similar to what the Reds have done with Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Fernandez, Robertson, and O'Brien coming in the bullpen. Likely 1 or 2 more additions to that bullpen based on what Derek Gould reported yesterday. I think they're pretty similar from where they were at the end of last year to where they are today. I don't think that the teams are all that dissimilar. The Cubs have taken a step back. The Brewers have taken a step back. The Pirates are still the Pirates. Everybody in this division, throw them into a hat, pick somebody's name out that's not the Pirates, you probably got the winner. I don't have anybody as the clear-cut favorite in the division. Alex, I did want to play a little game with you, though.
Ooh.
Because Frankie Montas just signed a 1-year contract worth $15 million. That is one of the many starting pitchers that are now off the market in the mid to lower tier that the Cardinals could have explored for their back end of the rotation. Now, instead, they decided to go with Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, right? So let's play a game called This or That. T-Bone, can you hit my open for me?
You can get with this. Man, this doesn't help because I still have crisscross's jump in my head.
We'll get there coming
Crisscross
up.
gonna.
All right. Would you rather have the Cardinals' 2 contracts that they signed at the back end of the rotation with Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, or Lucas Giolito on a 2-year deal worth $38.5 million, Alex? Which one would you rather have? This that the Cardinals got or that with Lucas Giolito?
I think I'd rather have Lynn and Gibson.
Same.
Yeah. I don't know if I trust Lucas Giolito.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was the biggest.
BK's like, oh, this plays right into my hand.
No, I'm just surprised. You'd rather have Kyle Gibson than Lucas Giolito.
Yeah.
Or Lance Lynn than Lucas Giolito.
Yeah.
Really?
Watching him in the second half.
Yeah, he was bad.
Did you watch Lance Lynn?
But this was my reasoning. I said that the Cardinals, the certainty on Lynn's a little questionable. They couldn't take on a project this offseason. That's a project.
Lance Lynn's a project.
No, he's not. He's the number 5 in your rotation.
I saw the Zips, they only 22 home runs allowed this year. Less than Michaelis.
Zip. I'm surprised by you guys. I would totally take Lucas Giolito on that contract over one of Gibson or Lynn. You can take your choice which one you'd rather have, but if this was going to be the deal for Lucas Giolito, now I don't know if he wanted to play here in St. Louis or not, but 2 years, $38 million? Yeah, I would have taken that for the Cardinals. All right, next one up. What the Cardinals got or Michael Wacha at 2 years and $32 million?
That. Michael Wacha.
Same.
Yep.
I'd take Wacha over. Pick my point.
Yeah.
You can replace Gibson.
Honestly, who cares?
Sweep it. I like that one as well. All right, next one up. What the Cardinals got or Seth Lugo at 3 years and $45 million?
That. I'd take Lugo. Yeah.
Give me
I
Lugo.
really wanted Seth Lugo. I thought he made a ton of sense.
Plus,
for the
you have
Cardinals.
the useful.
We're all in the same agreement here. All right, what the Cardinals got or Frankie Montas at 1 year, $15 million.
Take Leonard Gibson.
Yeah,
I don't
same.
think Montas is going to make it through the season.
Anytime you have a shoulder issue, I'm out.
What do you think called
What
a
the
juggernaut if
Cardinals
they got him?
or Luis Severino at 1 year, $13 million.
I'd go that.
See, I would have Gibson and Lynn.
with the
Severino's too much
Cardinals.
of a question mark.
I needed a little bit of certainty somewhere.
Yeah,
in
but
the
I'm only
lineup.
keeping one out of that group of Leonard Gibson, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll keep one of them and get the certainty and then give me that upside.
Kenta Maeda, 2 years, $24 million. What the Cardinals got this or that in Kenta Maeda?
I'd probably go that. I'd go
Maeda?
Maeda. Yeah, I'd go Maeda.
I think I would too. It's close, but I think I would take him over
I
Lynn.
at least know he's not going to give up the most hits in Major League
I don't
Baseball
think
at the
there's
end of
enough
the season.
upside to make up for the fact that he's got so many injury questions. He's up there in age as well. I'd probably go with this. I'd go with what the Cardinals got. All right, next one up. Tyler Mahle, my boy, 2 years, $22 million. Would you go with this, what the Cardinals got, or that? Tyler Mahle, 2 years, $22 million.
That. I'd go Mahle.
I'm playing chess, not checkers. I'd go with that because it would force them to go make another move in the rotation because
Oh,
you can't
it wouldn't.
expect him
Yeah,
to
no.
play on opening day. He's not going to be available,
Well.
so you've got to go out there and get at least one more starter. So I'd go with that because of what it
That's
forces
funny.
them to do.
It's funny you think the Cardinals would be forced into doing anything.
That's what you think,
Yeah.
Brandon, but Mo would run it back with Zach Thompson.
And
I would
Matthew
do that, though,
Liberatore.
too.
Did you see the progress of Liberatore
Sure
this
did.
past season?
All right, so we would basically say that the Cardinals messed up by jumping the market early, and instead we would have preferred the. Would you rather have? So essentially, we're saying you would rather have the two starters that the Royals signed as opposed to the two guys that the Cardinals signed for
Yeah.
similar money.
This segment brought to
Now,
you by the Cardinals front
granted,
office.
I want to point out, the Royals are making them a 1 and a 2, and we were making them a 4 and a 5.
No, that's fair.
Very true. Very
They're
true.
also better than the pitchers that you brought in as your 4 and
Yeah,
5.
true.
Both of them are significantly better,
Yeah.
and also not geriatrics.
You
All
know
right.
what? We want guys that wanted to be here.
Oh,
He's Alex
you
Ferrario.
get benefits with your ARP carded buffets.
That is Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex, before we get out of here, you had something that was stuck in your head all morning.
Yeah, it's,
I can't believe we've got
yeah. Do we have the music for it? Because
T-Bone, can you go ahead and play this? Because it's a weird day, guys. There's nothing going on in the world of sports. We're just having a good time
you
with
know
y'all.
what?
This is more
If
exciting
you're
than it'll
driving
be
around,
off-season.
if you're sitting in the office, just stand up and join in the fun.
Alex has had this stuck in his head all morning long, so now it's time for you to get it stuck in your head as well.
Jump, 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 jump. Crisscross will make you jump, jump.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Congratulations on getting that crisscross song
Good
stuck in
luck
your head for
getting
the
it out.
next 6 years, roughly.
Probably
Coming up in about
focus on the
15
meeting
minutes
today.
or so, is this the year that brings us to the breaking point with the college football playoff and the calendar that exists around it? We'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, Scott Perunovich. Is this the guy that the Blues have been looking for all along? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
But I'm telling you, from a potential standpoint, Scott Perunovich looks so much like Quinn Hughes. It is insane. I mean, Chris Kerber on the call a couple nights ago, we kept calling him Torrey Krug on the power play, and I kept hitting him. I'm like, listen, it's not Krug, it's Perunovich. But the point was, he looks so much like Krug, the way he moves his hips and the way he gets out of trouble. And you think he's cornered, but then he escapes it and he finds that lane. That's the creativity of him. And I think if he goes in the minors, plays a lot of games, he's going to come up and he's going to be quite a player. I don't think we're going to have a Cale Makar, but can we have something close to Quinn Hughes? I really think we can with this kid.
That was Joey Vitale about a year and a half ago talking about what the future looks like for Scott Perunovich. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we'll talk about the college football calendar and whether or not this is the year that it all comes to a breaking point. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. But Alex, Scott Perunovich, since we had that answer from Joey Vitale, has basically had zero experience at the NHL level where he was, for an extended period of time, legitimately healthy. Mm-hmm. And this is the first opportunity for us to really see that. Today, it sounds like he's got potentially, depending on what happens with Torrey Krug, a chance to play in that second pair with Marco Scandella because of health for Justin Falk, and then Torrey Krug is sick today. So we could see a little bit more ice time from Scott Perunovich in tomorrow's game as well, which is something I've been hoping for. Because, Alex, when you look at some of the super nerdy numbers, I'm talking like game score numbers.
Give them to me.
Even the most nerdy of nerdy hockey fans, I don't know that you're looking at this stuff. But they love Scott Perunovich, man. In every game that he has played recently, he is like either at the top or near the top of the list of the guys that made the biggest impact on the ice, especially from an offensive perspective. You go over to the nerdy numbers on Natural Stat Trick, where they check the Corsi ratings and the shots for percentage and the expected goals and all of that stuff. I'm not going to bore you with the actual numbers, but let's just put it this way. He's number one on the Blues in basically every statistical category at 5-on-5 among defensemen with what he does when he's on the ice. The Blues are better offensively when Perunovich is on the ice than when he's off of it by a pretty significant margin. Are we seeing the guy that the Blues told us that he was going to become, or what has been your evaluation of him thus far, Alex?
I mean, I think you're seeing the player that Doug Armstrong envisioned when they drafted him and envisioned when they looked down the road of who he was going to be with the team. I mean, Doug Armstrong went the puck-moving, offensive-minded defenseman, the smaller stature, but guys that can create more offense. When he signed Torrey Krug, traded for Justin Falk, and when you draft and develop a Scott Perunovich, he's been injured. That's been the hardest part with this. But let's not forget 2 years ago when we were all talking about the next big thing that was Scott Perunovich when he performed in the postseason. Then the injuries took place. This year he's doing the exact same thing. He's creating offense. He's pinching in early. He's keeping plays alive. And I don't think he's been bad defensively. I think defensively he's been what you would expect. He's tough in front of the net and he can defend with his stick. He's not a big guy. The Quinn Hughes thing is so hard because Quinn Hughes right now is a Norris Trophy candidate, and a lot of people are talking about him as in the same conversation as Cale Makar. But if you look at the types of players, they're the same guy. They both had success in college. Scott Perunovich slightly did better, winning a Hobie Baker Award. The difference is Quinn Hughes, when he was drafted, was put in a position to play 20 minutes a night. He was drafted, and as soon as he tasted the NHL, he was a number one defenseman. Scott Perunovich has been injured, but he's also been used as a third-pair defenseman. He's never really given the opportunity to be in the top pair and eat 18, 19, 20 minutes a night. Slow progress because you haven't played a lot of NHL games, but if the offense is there, if you're just not a liability defensively, I'm looking at this saying Scott Perunovich has proven he can stay healthy now on this stretch of games, and he's played some heavy teams. I don't understand what the problem is of looking at a Scott Perunovich and saying, you know what? Let's put him in a bigger role, and maybe the Krug and Falk situations provide that, but let's put him in a role where he's eating 18 minutes a night and see what he looks like out there. Because if he makes mistakes, cool, then you could build off of that. I just don't think we need a baby Scott Perunovich anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you because I think he's been fine. I think he's been what you kind of expected him to be for a guy that's been injured for as much as he has been. Like, if this was his first full season and you hadn't had injuries before and his draft status, knowing his pedigree, you would probably expect more from him, even though he is playing in that bottom pairing. But because he's dealt with injuries and he's now just starting to get his feet wet at the NHL level at 25, then yeah, this is what I've been expecting. I think you're right. Defensively, I don't think he's been awful. I don't think there's maybe been a couple plays where I've noticed it to where it's bad, but it's not been outrageous. I think at some point, and I think this is where the Blues are having that, though they are in a retool or rebuild or whatever it is, but they're still trying to remain competitive for the playoffs. They're kind of in the tough spot of because we want to be a playoff team, we can't put him in the top 4 and have him out there making mistakes because we do personally want to make the playoffs. If they didn't care about the playoffs, he'd be in the top 4 right now. But because they want to get there, I don't think they're playing him in the top 4 because they think the other 4 guys are better. But I think you're right. I think at some point, once we get probably past the trade deadline, they're going to have to start bumping up the usage for him and start seeing him more in that 18 minutes a night range.
Somebody texted in and said, I'd like to see his plus-minus get better before he gets that opportunity. Why? What are we trying to accomplish by babying Scott Perunovich, saying, well, he's not good defensively, and I don't want to play him in that position?
Also, and I know people hate this, but if you look at expected goals, he's actually the best on the team.
Yeah. I mean, guys, Quinn Hughes was a minus 34 in his first 2 full seasons as an NHL defenseman. You think Vancouver's people were like, keep him off the top 4? No, because you know what the expected outlook is for this kid, and he's going to create offense. Scott Perunovich, I will say, like, there is a little bit of hesitancy from him wanting to shoot, and there's more, like, delegating.
Sure.
But I think you can get rid of that by eliminating the idea that, well, if you don't perform well, we're going to take you out of the lineup. Look at a Scott Perunovich and say, you're in the lineup now. You're 25 years old. You're an unrestricted free agent after this season. We can't go through this year, you playing 60 games as a third-pair defenseman, and sit here and say, yeah, you know what? We got an idea of what this kid is. Put him on a line with Colton Parayko. If you don't like that idea, then keep him with Marco Scandella. But put him in the top 4. Let him play a lot more power play time. I'd put this kid on the number 1 power play unit instead of Torrey Krug. Hell, everything else isn't working right now. Why not give this kid a shot?
So in the last 6 weeks, he's been playing an average of, let's see here, about 14 minutes a night over the last 6 weeks. This is dating back to mid-November now. In that stretch where he's been a consistent player in the Blues lineup, that's why I use this stretch, not like just random fancy numbers or anything. Corsi rating's 55%. For those that aren't familiar with that, it essentially means Blues basically are driving offense more often than the opposition. It's a good number. It's the best among the Blues defensemen by a pretty significant margin. If you're looking at shots for, just like a basic rudimentary statistic, right? The Blues have outshot their opponents when Scott Perunovich is on the ice 103-84 in the last 6 weeks. That's a really good mark by what the Blues are doing. If you're looking at scoring chances, okay, sure, they're putting a bunch of pucks on net, but what does that mean, BK? It's probably all terrible opportunities. No, not at all. 94-82 when it comes to scoring chances in favor of the Blues. The other Blues defensemen that you're looking at on the team, like every single one of them, is at or below 50% so far on this season and at or below 50% over the last 6 weeks as well. He is the one guy that is really driving offense. It's happening at 5-on-5. It's happening on the power play. And so as a result of that, what I would like to see is more opportunities. Even if Torrey Krug is playing, I would like to see Scott Perunovich getting some of those big-time minutes. In fact, I would just flip Nick Leddy and Scott Perunovich. Yep. I would just make the change. I understand that Nick Leddy is a guy that has been there, done that. I understand that Nick Leddy is somebody that you are paying to be the partner for Colton Parayko. But
is Nick Leddy a part of your future?
He's not.
Nope.
He's not. And I have always wondered what it would look like if you had somebody that can really drive offense in that pairing with Colton Parayko. I think in our heads, Alex, we think of Colton Parayko and we go back to 2019, right? And we say, okay, the guy that you need is 6'5", super long, and a stay-at-home defenseman. Well, what if the game has changed? And what if Colton Parayko specifically has changed? And now he can be the guy that is the stay-at-home defenseman while somebody else is driving the offense for Parayko. That's what I'd like to see, and I think the guy that best suits that role is Scott Perunovich.
We always talked, or at least I always talked about finding somebody who can play with Parayko like Jay Bouwmeester did. Now, I'm not saying Scott Perunovich is Jay Bouwmeester because the size is the biggest difference. But you know what the similarities are? Scott Perunovich is predictable. When the puck is on his stick, you know what he's going to do. He's going to take it and he's going to skate out of his zone. And what Colton Parayko doesn't need as a defensive pairing is somebody who's unpredictable, somebody who tries to skate off a check, somebody who tries to make the pass that forces it down the middle and it gets picked off. Scott Perunovich, although he's going to make those mistakes, every young player does, I just look at it and say, like, you get predictability with a Colton Parayko. Maybe he's not the biggest guy out there, but what you need is you need two guys who can drive offense. And look, right now, Quinn Hughes is having a Norris Trophy year. He's having it because he's got somebody who's very predictable playing with him in Philip Hronek.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. By the way, Alex, before we get out of here, Matt Kessel going to be a significant part of this lineup. I found it really interesting that he was playing second pair minutes over Tyler Tucker, despite the fact that Tucker was here, Kessel was down in the AHL. They clearly value Kessel at this point as more of a more likely part of the top four defensively than Tyler Tucker. What are you expecting out of him? Is this a guy that we should expect to be a part of the future? Is he like a seventh defenseman? What do you see as the future for Matt Kessel?
I mean, I think Matt Kessel can be a third pair defenseman. I was texting with Ryan Smith, who does play-by-play for the Springfield Thunderbirds, and he said Matt Kessel is a guy who uses his size to his advantage. He's 6'3", 205 pounds. We always talk about needing bigger defensemen out there, and Ryan told me that he's at his best when he doesn't try and get away from his game, meaning he stays in the zone. He doesn't try and chip in with this. So if Matt Kessel is going to play to his advantage, size and space, and be able to take guys off of the puck, I think he could be a perfectly acceptable third pair defenseman that you can use in any situation. Is he going to play nasty? No, I don't think so. But the way that Joel Edmondson played with the Blues, to where he was tough in front of the net, he used his size to his advantage, I think you could see a little of that from Matt Kessel. It's just a matter of getting him more reps. And frankly, I'm glad they're doing that with him, because I think we've already kind of seen what Tyler Tucker is at his best.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you guys get any questions in, we'll get to questions and answers coming up at 11:45. But coming up next, is this the year where we finally get to the breaking point with the college football playoff and the calendar that surrounds it? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Taylor Hendricks here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tomorrow night as they host the Vancouver Canucks. And we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. And then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. This SportsCenter update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Kirby Smart was not happy following the Georgia win against Florida State.
What happened, Kirby?
There were too many opt-outs. He said, quote, "This needs to be fixed. People need to see what happened tonight, and they need to fix it. It needs to be fixed. It's very unfortunate that Florida State had a good football team and a good football program, and they're in the position that they're in right now." Georgia beat Florida State 63-3. That was a non-competitive football game, Alex, and it never should have been expected to be a competitive football game. Not because Florida State was without Jordan Travis. Everybody knew that that was going to be the case. Because Florida State was without 30 of their scholarship players, man. This calendar that currently exists in college football is untenable. It cannot exist in future seasons. And yet, because it's college football, because it's the NCAA, I have no belief that it will actually get fixed by this time next year. Alex, do you think this was a breaking point for the sport? Do you think that we will see this fixed next year, or will they have to see it fail with the college football playoff expanded before they decide to do anything?
I'd like to believe that it's going to be fixed because it just seems like there was very little hype around all of the bowl games going into it this past weekend. I mean, I told you last week on Friday that I found myself multiple times going, oh, hey, this game's on. Like, that doesn't happen. There used to be so much hype around it, and it's because of all of these opt-outs. And then you get this Georgia game that it's not even an actual football game. The dude is going on Instagram Live in the middle of the game because it was such a blowout. I'd like to believe that the NCAA looks at this and says, yeah, we need to fix this. But they won't because it's the NCAA. You know what they're going to say? Well, sure, that was bad, but we're going to 12 teams next year for the playoffs, which means there's going to be a lot more hype, which means there's going to be more people that aren't opting out, so we're not going to worry about it. NCAA always likes to kick the can down the road and say, we'll get this done next time around, or next time if it's a problem. So, no, I don't think it's going to happen. I think next year they'll act as if more hype was because of the playoffs, and then they'll sit there and they'll say, we'll just keep figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Alex. This should be the point where they look at this and go, okay, yeah, we do need to change this. We need to do something with the transfer portal, bump back the date, whatever you need to do to get it figured out. But I don't think they're going to. I think what you said, they're going to have to see it fail in the college football playoff. Why? Because that's where the serious dollar bill is. And that's when it would become wait a minute, we can't be having, I don't think 30 would happen, but we can't have 3 of the best players opt out of a college football playoff game. That can't happen because that is huge for us, and those guys are going to go into the portal because they have to. Otherwise, they may be stuck at a school where they lose their job next year. So I think they're probably going to wait to see, and they would probably, and I think this would be the wrong kind of thinking, but they're probably going to look at that and go, that was just a major one-off. That won't happen again, that what happened to Florida State. That's a one-off. We're not going to address a one-off. I think it has to fail in the playoff before they make serious adjustments.
The thing is, it's not going to fail in the playoff because the players that are playing for those teams, they all participate. Like, we're seeing a lot of kids now decide to decide to transfer from Alabama, right? We're going to see a lot of kids over the next couple of weeks decide to transfer from the teams that were participating in the college football playoff. Now, next year, will you see some of those teams that are like 8 to 12? Will you see some of those players decide to transfer that were maybe special teamers, third stringers,
backup quarterback,
something like that? You could see that. That's possible, and that could impact those games. But I don't know that that's something that's going to make significant changes. It really is these secondary bowl games, like the Cotton Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, like those types of games. Those are the ones that are being impacted in a significant way. The thing is, man, the TV numbers are still unbelievable. I don't know if you guys saw how many people watched that Georgia versus Florida State game. It was like 10 million people that tuned in for that on average. I couldn't believe it. I don't know why anybody would have spent their time watching that game because it was a joke. There was no reason to watch when we all knew what was taking place. And after the first half, man, what were we watching for? You don't know any of the kids that were participating in the game at that point. The under?
Yeah, what was it at?
I mean,
Maybe you live bet the
They
under.
scored 63 points on their own.
That's
so I
what
thought
you're
the
watching.
under
That's
was
what
what
you're
you wanted
watching
in that
for.
game.
That's the over.
You live bet the under. You stick around for the
I
second
wish
half.
the kid on Instagram Live would have brought his entire team so the under would have freaking hit.
The way that you make this work, I think it's very simple, but I just don't have any belief that college football will actually get this done. You play the conference championship as you did this year, the first week in December. That's December 1st this year. The dates could change around a bit, but that's roughly when you play it. The next week you play round 1. That's the round of 12, right? So you'll have the teams 5 to 12. They will be participating at their home sites in the first round of the playoff. And then the next week you do round 2. Those are the 1 through 8 essentially that remain in the playoff. The next week we're now up to December 22nd. You have the semifinals. So yes, you have played for some teams 4 consecutive weeks. That sucks. That's unfair to the kids, but because of the way that college football is, that's the only way you can really get this thing done. And then about 10 days later, you play the college football playoff final on January 1st. And later that night at midnight, that is when the transfer portal opens. And for the next 2 weeks, we essentially have college football's version of free agency. You don't open it before because then the floodgates open the way that we have seen so far this year during the bowl games. Put the emphasis back onto the bowl games, not because they matter a lot, but because they deserve the spotlight, right? To celebrate these individual teams. You don't want to break these teams up before you get there. And then when you get to January 1st, you once again open up a new round of college football news with the portal entries and the portal transfers, which essentially becomes for them what free agency is for so many other sports. That's the way you make it work. And I know there's some that say, yeah, but how do you work with the calendars for the individual schools? A lot of them, it's about 2 weeks into January that you get to before you see the deadline to enroll in classes. So that's the way you make it work. We already have right now like 2 weeks where kids are really going on these visits. You just consolidate that to the beginning of January. It sucks. It's not ideal, but that's probably the only way that they're going to be able to make this thing work. I just, on a scale of 1 to 10, my belief in the NCAA and making something like that actually happen is like a 2. I think we are going to have to see at least a year of this with the college football playoff before anything has actually changed, despite everybody seemingly being on the same place where it needs to change.
I think NCAA is always in denial too, to where they'll be like, no, it's not as bad as you think it is. And then when they get the playoffs, there will be a good amount of budget and views on there, and they'll be like, oh, look, see, there's no problems here. We're fine. Nobody really cares about everything else. We'll just focus on the 12 teams, and that's our moneymaker.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. One follow-up on this before we get to questions and answers on the other side. BK, so in your scenario, the 5 through 12 teams would get a bye if they're not in the conference championship. But for the teams that are in the conference championship that slide down to that mark, they would now have to play in consecutive weeks. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's the breaks. That's the only way you can make it work, man. Like, I think that it's unfortunate. It's not equitable, but those teams that are in the conference championship game, the reason why you want to win is to potentially get into the top 4, and then you get that extra bye week. But yeah, it's unfortunate that this is the only way you can make it work. Otherwise, we get rid of conference championships. Those are the ways that you can do it.
Can do that. That's money.
Exactly. So we can either get rid of the tens of millions of dollars that this produces via the television rights deals, or we can just admit that there's never going to be a perfect way to make all of this happen simultaneously. Unless we want to get rid of all of the bowl games, which again would cost them tens of millions of dollars in revenue from the TV rights deals.
We don't lose money.
Also not happening. So what do? You make the kids go out there and do something that is unfortunate, which is playing, basically 16 weeks of football to be able to win the national championship. That's not ideal, but that's the way that it's going to have to work.
I don't know how much this would help, but could you start? We've got week 0 now, quote unquote.
You can start the
week
season
0,
a week
and then
earlier.
you get that's what I would say.
They're not
Start
going
a
to do
week
that
earlier.
either, though, because now you're getting into like mid-August when you're starting the regular season. No, I'm not saying what you're saying is fair. They're just not going to do it because this is
he
how
vehemently
the sport
disagrees.
operates.
He hears what you're saying.
I don't. I think what he's saying is
I
smart.
think that's what they should do.
I think they should move the season up, but they won't do that with the calendar. I don't know why, but they won't. I think
because they're students
of the
first.
Exactly. Well, I think it's because the students aren't on campus yet, and they don't want to lose out on the ticket revenue that comes with the students being on campus.
But education is more important.
There. Exactly. Coming up next, questions and answers here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about and excited to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care HVAC system because look at the winter time and when you get to the summertime and you got to flip that puppy on, whether it's for the heat or the air, you panic a little bit, especially if you're like me that has a 27-year-old unit and just continues to push it every year saying, well, let's see if we can go another year with that. But that's where Classic Air Care comes into play. Look, my family has been using this company for the last 20 or so years. They started with Harster and Classic Air Care bought them out. But here's the thing. It doesn't change anything. Classic Air Care still has the best customer service. And I do the maintenance program, which means they come out every 6 months to check it, make sure it's good to go, clean the unit, and take care of it. So I know that I have the best customer service on that side of things. But if you're in the market for a good HVAC system or you need to upgrade, you don't want to live in panic like I do, well, then call Classic Air Care because they've got financing options. And look, that's not available at every HVAC place. They've got a deal right now where you only got to pay $99 a month for 18 months that will take care of that HVAC system. So go check them out. You'll find out why they got a 4.8 rating on Google. You'll see the customer service, and you'll find out why I love Classic Air Care. ClassicAirCare.com.
Three 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers. Let's get to this one from the 314. Alex, what is your door etiquette? terms of holding the door for someone? Is there a cutoff time?
That's a really good question. No,
I feel like down the hall. If I can say, and this means something different for everybody, of course, but if I can say they are down the hall from me, I'm probably not holding the door for them.
if I can see them and they're walking towards the door, I'm probably going to hold it for them.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I think that is highly uncomfortable when they're too far away.
It's very rude to do.
Oh, what are you trying to say?
No, it's rude for me to do because then I'm forcing that person to run to the door.
Right.
And it's really awkward. But I'd feel so rude if they get up there. I guess it comes down to what's in their hands, too. If you've got something in your hands, I'll hold it for you. But if you can open the door by yourself, then do it yourself.
Sure.
Unless it's like, where you don't have to run to the door.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Where if you have to run to the door, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah.
Unless you do have stuff in your hand. Like if you're carrying a bunch of stuff, I would hold the door.
Like if I see something, I'm going to hold the door open. Like if you've got to wait more than 60 seconds to hold the door, then don't be a jerk.
That's fair.
Probably that's a good one.
60 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a long-ass hallway.
I feel like it's like 20 seconds.
I'm thinking more like
15 to 20. If it's going to take you more than 15 to 20 seconds to get to me,
Even
it's probably
15
not
to
worth
20
it.
feels long.
I'm thinking more
I'm thinking
parking
like
lot.
5 seconds. You can't get here in 5 seconds. Get the door.
I'm thinking more parking lot than like hallway. Like hallway, I'm going to hold it no matter what if you're coming. But like if I see somebody get out of their car,
I'm
and they
not
got a
holding
big
the door for you in the hallway.
Why?
Get your own door, Alex.
Wow. Whoa.
314-399-9646 is the Air Cup
Open
and
the
Service
damn
text
door
line.
yourself.
From the 636. Guys, Mo says that he would like to see innings eaters for the Cardinals this season.
Oh, you got him.
Is that on Ollie as much as it is on the pitchers? Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. And I think it's going to be one of the great tests for Ollie Marmol this year. Now, I also think it's noteworthy. Ollie Marmol allowed his pitchers to see the third time through the order more than all but 2 teams last year. In terms of batters faced third time through, Cardinals were right up there in the top 3 in Major League Baseball a season ago. So Ollie gets a lot of criticism, fair or otherwise, for removing his starters early. He removed his starters early because they were inefficient. He did not remove his starters early very often during the regular season due to the third time through penalties. So I do think he's a guy that will leave his pitcher out there, sometimes longer than what you'd like, because he sees value in innings eaters during the regular season as well. But yeah, I do think it's on Ollie as much as it is on the pitchers.
I'd agree with that. I think it is on Ollie as well because I'm fascinated to see what he's going to define as the quote-unquote breaking point to pull them from a game. Because, like, you look at Lance Lynn, yeah, he'll eat innings, but the whole question I have, and I think it's going to be the biggest question about the Cardinals' 2024 season is, okay, he can eat innings, but how effective are those innings? I would argue 6 innings and 4 or 5 earned runs is not a very effective outing. Now, they may argue in the long run it is, but maybe I'm more short-sighted, and I'm looking at more of that win. Sure. So I'm going to be fascinated to see how Ollie Marmol approaches it, and for maybe just my perception of Ollie, and I think the way the fan base views him as a analytically driven manager, innings eaters are not really much of a thing because of that third time penalty. So I'll be fascinated to really see it. And I understand what you're saying about leaving those guys in. It is interesting because that is something that I would think that if you built the right bullpen around and made 2 additions to, I could see where he ends up saying, okay, maybe Lynn's only going to give us 5 today because we've got the full bullpen ready to go.
Yeah, I still think Lynn and Gibson are kind of going to be the sacrificial lamb a lot this season, knowing that their ERA is not going to look pretty, but they also know that if they need days off of their bullpen, they're going to keep them out there no matter what.
All right, final thing here from the 314, guys. Which of these comebacks to you was more impressive? The Colts coming back from down 38-10 in 2014 against the Chiefs in the playoffs, or the Patriots 28-3 comeback against the Falcons in the Super Bowl in 2017? I think it's the Falcons blowing that 28-3 lead against the Patriots.
It's the Super Bowl, and it was the 4th quarter that they did that comeback. Yeah. Like, I don't know if anything will ever trump that.
Now, as a Chiefs fan, I don't know that anything will ever be worse than losing that game against the Colts in the playoffs.
I remember that game.
Oh, it was terrible.
What year was that?
Terrible. 2014, I think it was.
2014. I remember that
because the Andrew Luck comeback game where he fumbles at the goal line and then scores on it. I
remember that because I was a booth assistant for Curbs at the time at the Blues, and so I was on the elevator watching that game take place.
Charles got hurt. I was on my way home from Las Vegas. I went to Vegas for, I guess it would have been my 21st birthday that year.
And you didn't stay for that game?
No, we had it planned already prior to the game being scheduled. Man. When I left, they were up 28-3. When we landed, they were on the verge of losing. I was like, I don't understand what happened here.
Way to go.
Or not 28-3. They were up 30-10 or whatever it was.
Way to go, Casey.
It's brutal. All right, coming up next, is it officially Dylan Cease or bust when it comes to the Cardinals improving in their rotation? We'll get into that coming up here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, the number of options that remain for the Cardinals when it comes to upgrading the rotation is dwindling. And as you look at the free agent market, I think there's only two that would legitimately be seen as like tangible upgrades over what you have currently. It's Jordan Montgomery and it's Blake Snell. At this point in time, I think it's fair to say the Cardinals are not going to land either of those via the free agent market. Do you guys agree with that? We can go ahead and write off either Monty or Snell as legitimate options for the Cardinals.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd write Monty off, but probably yes.
I'd be
surprised.
Scale of 1 to 10, what would your level of surprise be if the Cardinals, if it came out tomorrow or anytime, the Cardinals have signed a deal with Jordan Montgomery? Your
like
level
8?
of surprise to that would be, okay, 8.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that range, yeah.
I think mine would be like a 9. Like, I'd be pretty shocked if that ended up being the case. The trade market is where we've turned our attention to if they're going to make any kind of an upgrade in this rotation prior to opening day. And with that in the back of our mind, I go over to Jeff Passan's piece from earlier today on ESPN.com, where he says Dylan Cease, according to his sources, quote, is still likely to be moved. He adds that the White Sox suitors have narrowed. The chances of either Burns or Bieber getting dealt in the coming months, though, are dwindling. That is why, according to Jeff Passan, Jesus Luzardo's name continues to percolate among teams that are interested in a starter. He then continues from there, saying that the price would be significant for Luzardo, probably even higher than what it would be to acquire Dylan Cease. Alex, as you look at the potential trades that are out there, and JP Morosi brought up again yesterday, hey, maybe Seattle could do something where they trade for Dylan Cease and then trade one of their starters. I don't think they're going to do that, but do you still view any of these guys as legitimate options for the Cardinals?
I mean, if I had to pick one that's legitimate, it would be Dylan Cease because it's probably going to cost you the least to acquire. But if Seattle is still going to be in the conversation of moving a starting pitcher, I think they should be a realistic option for the Cardinals. Now, do the Cardinals do it? Probably not. And I would still put Framber Valdez's name out there, although we haven't really heard much since Ken Rosenthal reported that.
He went on vacation, that's why.
It makes sense. It makes sense. But I still think there's legitimate options that the Cardinals could go out there and acquire from a fan's perspective. But from a Cardinals perspective, I'd say no. I think the
weird offseason.
I think the Cardinals are just done.
Yeah, I think that Cease is like the only guy that I would circle right now because I don't think the Cardinals want to give up Nolan Gorman. And he's the guy that I think would have to go back in a Luzardo deal because the Marlins aren't trading Luzardo for a prospect haul. They're trading to help the big league club, and they go, we got a lot of depth at starting. We can pluck one of those guys to help improve the offense. With the White Sox, I think you could probably get him for a prospect-oriented package. Or you may, and I say that, and maybe you do have to include a major league piece, but it's not a 40 home run piece. Maybe it's like the Donovan type, someone like that, or a Burleson type that's got to go involved in that deal. But he's more of a prospect-laden package to go acquire him. I think that's the kind of move the Cardinals are looking to do if they're looking for starting pitching. I think if they're going to acquire a guy that's going to slide into the top of the rotation, they're going to try and do it by plucking guys from the farm system and maybe like a complimentary piece on this major league roster to go and get that guy rather than trade Nolan Gorman. Because I think they still value Nolan Gorman as, man, that's 40 home runs, and we don't really have that kind of power from the left side. And if I think you mentioned this yesterday, BK, if they're using those ZiPS projections, and they have their own formula, but if they're using something along those lines and their model says, hey, Goldie's hitting like 21 home runs, Arenado's hitting 23, well, yeah, then you cannot trade Gorman's power out of this lineup. And that's where they may say, okay, well, then you can pluck us from the Luzardo market, the Gilbert market, if he's available. We'll go out there and see if we can make a deal with some of our prospects that we have in the system.
I think it all comes down to how they view the roster right now. And that may seem obvious, but what I mean by that is, do they view themselves as being in a window? And if they do, like, is this the beginning of what they believe is a winning window where they're trying to build around Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn and all of these young guys, Nolan Gorman, Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar? Is that the winning window? Is like the future of those guys? Or do they view the winning window as the end of Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt's primes here in St. Louis? Because depending on how they view that will alter the way that they view the rest of this offseason. If you view it as our winning window is with the next group of players that we are developing right now, well, then it makes a lot of sense, honestly, that they went out and got Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, because what they're really doing is they're buying themselves time. Those guys are, for the Cardinals rotation, what players like Kasperi Kapanen and Jakub Vrana were for the Blues this year of, hey, they're placeholders. They're going to have these spots where Jimmy Snuggerud is going to eventually be, and Zachary Bolduc is eventually going to be. And when you look at the Cardinals, I could see the corollary there. That being said, though, I don't view it that way. I view them as being in a winning window that is determined by Goldie and Arenado. If you're going to have those guys on the roster right now and you're going to try to win with them, well, then let's go for it, man. Because you look down to Atlanta, they just made the move that the Cardinals are eventually going to have to make. It's going to hurt. Like, I've seen a lot of national analysts say, you know what, I don't really love this trade for Atlanta, where they decided to give up Von Grissom, who was a previous top 100 prospect, a guy who every year of his minor league career has hit at least 300 at that respective level. That's a hell of a player, man. Nice bat to have from the right side of things. He's got like 6 years of club control remaining. That is not a guy you typically give up for 1 year of club control over a starting pitcher. But that is exactly what Atlanta did. Why? Because he was redundant. They didn't have a spot for Von Grissom in their lineup. At second base, he's blocked. At shortstop, he couldn't beat out Orlando Arcia. At third base, they've got a guy that's blocking him. So what do you do when you've got a surplus of position player talent at those spots? You trade one of them. You trade one of them for the thing that you don't have. We've got too many middle infielders. All right, let's take the guy that is young, potentially going to be really good, and let's move him for something that we don't have. What do the Braves not have? A front-end starter. They needed another guy that adds to the front end of their starting rotation when they get to October. They decided to do that for Chris Sale. Where's the Cardinals move like that? I don't know who it is. I can't give you the exact name. I don't know if it's going to be Dylan Cease or Jesus Luzardo, or if it's going to be one of the guys from the Mariners, or if it could be Framber Valdez, or somebody that we have not even mentioned on these airwaves yet. But that is the move that they are missing. The Braves are aggressive in going out and finding that creative answer to the problem that they believe exists on their roster. When have the Cardinals done that? When was the last time you looked at the Cardinals and said to yourself, man, that is a super aggressive move, and I don't know if it's going to work for them, but I really respect it. They don't do that very often, man.
2011?
And it's something that they're missing.
Yeah.
It is something that they have to do if they're going to get serious about winning right now during this window that I believe they have, even if they don't, with Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt.
I don't think they define a window. Like, I don't think they define it as whether it's the Goldie Arenado, like you mentioned, or the Gorman Walker window. Because they won't define it as a winning window, because then you have to kind of push chips in on one of those. And I don't think they do that. I think they just view it as, we got to stay consistent. And that's why they try not to trade some of those pieces that you're talking about. Like, in theory, what I thought they were going to do was, you have Sajaci, who's a guy that right now is blocked. I mean, what's his future here? I don't
Utility
know.
Player.
Yeah, maybe, but like, you have a Donovan that's
like
here.
5 of those.
What I'm saying is, if the future for him is utility player, that's not the best use of that resource potential.
But you had him, and then I thought like Herrera was going to be that guy because he had Kisner in the backup, and instead they just let him go and sent him off in the wind, and then brought up Herrera to be the backup. Like,
still in
they had
Carlson's
assets.
future.
Exactly.
You clearly are viewing Tommy Edman as your starting center fielder right now. Just go ahead and make that bet, and Palacios can be your fourth outfielder. It's fine. Just go ahead and go with that. By the way, you've got a guy that's starting out next year in AAA that you think is going to be your eventual answer in center field. So go ahead and trade Dylan Carlson. Just end it. Just say, you know what? We were wrong. We didn't get what we thought we were going to get out of Dylan Carlson this year. It's time for us to move on. The Mariners did that. Look at how much they put into Kalanick. It didn't work. And they said, you know what? We're going to go ahead and have to make a move here. It's a hard move. It's a move that our fans aren't going to like, but we got to do it. The Braves did that with Von Grissom. They thought he was going to be their answer at shortstop long term. They played him for 65 games accordingly. It didn't work. They decided Orlando Arcia is a better option for us there. So go ahead and go with the guys that you think. Make your bets, and then live with whatever the results are. The Cardinals seem to want to have all of their bets available to them, and then they're hedging every single one of them.
Yeah.
And the result is, okay, we're going to have to be light in a significant way somewhere else.
And that's that's the problem, is they're not willing to make that bet because they would view a bet not as an all-in move, but a move that could set them back in the future. And their concern is, we don't want to go through they would rather have a 20-year stretch of above 500 baseball, always in the race in the division, and then have like the one outlier like they had this past year, rather than go, what if we had like 5 to 7 years where we were like really good, had a winning window, and potentially be set back and maybe not go in a rebuild, but have a retool where we're below 500 for like 3 to 5 years. And that's the issue, is they just want that consistency. And look, there's a lot of respect to having that.
Absolutely.
What they accomplished in the 2000s is really impressive in the decade with Mo, this being the first year below 500 in a really long time. But when you do that and you set that as that is the standard, is we're just going to do this, it does say, you know what, we can't push chips in because we're more focused on not just the success of this year, but a lot of success over the long run, not just in what it looks like 3 to 5 years, but 3 to 7 years and the success that they do. So I think that's the problem. I
think they wait too long to make decisions, though.
I agree with that. I think they won't make the bets, and they wait too long on prospect. I think they overvalue their prospects. I think that's their biggest issue.
It's because of fear of what's taken place in the past, but I also think they're fearful of being short in an area that they can't fix. And when you got all these middle infielders, like the Cardinals love their scrappy utility infielders that can do anything, well, why would we trade if we've got Donovan and Tommy Edman and Nolan Gorman, and now we've got Thomas Ajacey?
My thing is, like, you can go to the market right now if you really wanted to and find one of those guys.
Look at
$5 million.
Exactly. The Cardinals kind of have the mindset of like hoarders, to where it's like, I don't want to give this up. I'm going to find use for this at some point, because when I get into a playoff game, this is what I need.
I don't know if this is the case for you at home, Alex. It used to be a lot worse for us. It's not this way anymore now that we have Luka, but I am somebody that at anything, if there's ever a decision, like if we're moving, for example, you know how you go through the stuff where it's like, hey, keep and put into a box that we're going to move with, or get rid of and let's go ahead and throw it away or give it away. I'm always if there's a 50-50 decision, get rid of it. Like, if there's any question about whether or not we're going to need this in the future, go ahead and put it in the box that we're going to give away. My wife is the opposite. If there's any question of if we could potentially need it 10, 20, 15 years down the road, go ahead and keep it, because we're going to want that down the road.
We're living that life right now with our toys for the girls.
Exactly.
Can't give them away.
That is what the Cardinals do. The Cardinals are the team that looks at the thing that they have, the toy for their kid that they know, oh, we're never going to need this. But in 18 years, when baby Luka is now going off to college, I want him to be able to decide if he wants to keep that for his basement that he will never use, never touch again, never see. I want him to be able to have that as a memory for himself. That's what the Cardinals are. The Cardinals are doing that, but instead of being memories and toys and all that, it's Dylan Carlson, it's Alec Burleson, it's Thomas Ajacey, it's Victor Scott, it's Tommy Edman. We want all of these things to be here because we developed them, and other teams can't have them because they are ours. And then what ends up happening is you keep them for 1, 2, 3 too many years, and then it's like, oh, does anybody want these guys? No? You guys don't want Tyler O'Neill? Can we get a reliever? Just a reliever. We'll take whatever. No relievers? Okay. What about like a Rule 5 pick? Is there anything we can get?
International money.
And that's what ends up happening, man, is they wait too long on these players to make a decision. And then the rest of the league has made the same determination as the Cardinals have, which is, yeah, that guy can't play.
And, you know, we could say all the time about how Doug Armstrong and John Mozeliak are the same person, but that's where they differ. Because if Doug Armstrong views something that's like, hey, this isn't going to play into our future and there's something available to us now, I'll go make that move. And to me, that's what aggressive teams do. They say, this guy doesn't fill a void for us. This guy is just a piece of the puzzle. We've got to go fill a void, so let's move this so we could go get something else.
And Army, to his credit, defined a winning window. He said when they brought in O'Reilly, hey, well, this is the window.
We need to win right now.
He said we've got a 5-year winning window.
Years. And he defined it. The Cardinals have never said, like, yeah, this is the time.
And look at what they did in those 5 years. Now, of course, you win the Stanley Cup, but we shoot it down now because it didn't work out. But they were so aggressive to where they traded for Justin Falk. They signed Torrey Krug. Like, they were always in motion to keep that window alive.
And they really tried to maximize it. It didn't work
but
because
they nearly
of the pandemic.
did. Yeah, the pandemic.
I think the pandemic really screwed them on a lot of this.
We might have been talking about another cup.
Or at least another run, if nothing else. I mean, that team in 2021 was really good.
2020 was also the year that they shut it down.
It just got shut down because of the pandemic. So it is what it is. But they saw the window, and they tried their best to take advantage of it. I still think they should have brought Petra back, but neither here nor there. He's Alex, that's T-Bone on BK. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, speaking of the Blues, they're going up tomorrow night against the Vancouver Canucks, who are on an absolute heater this year, Alex. But last year they stunk. They fired their coach midway through the season. How'd they get to where they are today? What do they have that the Blues do not? We'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes. NFL Quick Hitters coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's get into some NFL quick hitters. I love hearing that sound. That music is just, this time of the year, nothing better. Alex, what is more likely to happen, in your opinion? The Bills get the 2 seed in the AFC.
Ooh.
Or they miss the playoffs entirely. Here is how either scenario would take place. To get the 2 seed, very simple. They beat the Dolphins. If the Bills beat the Dolphins this weekend, they get the 2 seed because they have the head-to-head victory over the Chiefs.
Don't they have to have the Browns lose, though?
Nope. Browns are locked into their spot in the playoffs right now.
Okay. Oh, yeah, duh, because they can't get... Okay, I gotcha.
So, the Bills win, they are the 2 seed. If they lose to the Dolphins and the Jaguars beat Tennessee and the Steelers beat the Ravens, who are expected to play their backups this weekend, the Bills would miss the playoffs entirely. So let me give you the scenario one more time. They lose to Miami, and then the Jaguars, who need to win this weekend, beat Tennessee, and the Steelers, who need to win this weekend to get into the playoffs, beat the Baltimore Ravens backups. If all of those 3 things happen, the Bills are out. Completely miss the playoffs. So their scenario is either 2 seed or out of the playoffs. Which one's more likely in your mind, Alex?
I'll say 2 seed because I think they beat the Dolphins. I think the Bills aren't going to leave it up for chance. The Dolphins are already banged up on the defensive side, which is going to make it very tough to beat Buffalo. And that game's played in Buffalo, correct? Or is that in Miami?
It's in Miami.
Okay, so that's at least a home field advantage. But I'll say it's a lot more likely that the Buffalo Bills get the 2 seed because I just don't think Miami's that good.
Yeah, I think when you look at this on paper, in theory, you would think it's more likely they miss the playoffs. But then you go, wait a minute. Has Miami ever beat anybody good?
No.
The answer to that is no. They've been terrible against the good teams this year.
Man, I feel bad for them because it's the exact same thing that happened last year where they just crumble down the stretch.
And they're dealing. Tyreek clearly looked hurt. Bradley Chubb's now out for the year.
Waddle has a high ankle sprain.
Yeah,
Xavier Howard's out.
They are in serious trouble, and that's the injuries. They are the paper tiger of the NFL, where they can beat all the bad teams, but then when you go up against when you go up against a competent team, they just don't show up and they get shellacked. So I think Buffalo's going to beat them, and I think it could be ugly, too. I think they're going to get the 2 seed.
I think Buffalo's going to beat them, and then I think Buffalo, if they get the 2 seed, is really the only threats to the Ravens in the AFC. Them getting the 2 seed would be a really big deal.
Don't forget about Joe Flacco and the Browns.
Grandpa Dynamite?
Just yesterday, you were all in.
You know what? You're right. I take it back. I actually placed a bet last night on the Browns.
You did.
I placed a bet on the Super Bowl matchup, Browns versus 49ers.
What were the odds on that one?
At, I think it was 25-1 for those.
Grandpa Dynamite ain't going to make it that far, guys.
So?
No, old age will kick in sooner
I'm with
or
you
later.
guys. I think it's more likely that they get the number 2 seed. But don't write this off. If they end up missing out on the playoffs, that would be one hell of a storyline. Because then I think you can make an argument that the second, maybe third best team in the AFC ends up missing out on the playoffs entirely.
And the thing is
and if they do, by the way, sweeping changes will take place. This game this weekend could decide the future for Sean McDermott and Stephon Diggs.
Oh, I think Diggs is already probably gone. I think you're right about Sean McDermott.
He should be a Chief. Come on down, buddy.
I think Diggs is mentally quit on that team.
Yeah, he's done nothing for the last
I think
6 weeks.
why he's had
way down. He's at 65% snaps.
I think he's just given up.
All right, next
He'll
thing
be a
up.
Cowboy, by the way.
Speaking of the Cleveland Browns, which team is more likely to go on a run to the Super Bowl, boys? The Browns or the Miami Dolphins?
Browns.
I just
That's crazy.
I just ish-talked the Miami Dolphins. No chance.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, what are you elite at? We always ask that question. And I don't know if Miami's still elite at offense, especially because Tyreek Hill's hurt.
About health. Do you think they're going to be healthy? My answer is no.
No.
Raheem Mostert, Jalen Waddle, both legitimately injured right now. Not just hurt, but injured. And then Tyreek Hill is clearly hurt.
And then in the playoffs, what's more important? And I think defense is a lot more important in those big games. And Cleveland's one of the best at it.
It's Joe bleeping Flacco in the year 2023, and 2024, excuse me. And we just said they are more likely to go on a run than the Miami Dolphins, who for the first 2 months of the season were the talk of the NFL with what they were doing offensively. That's crazy. I think you're right. I agree with you. But that's wild to say right now.
I still think that if the Cleveland Browns pull out any victory in the playoffs, we're not talking about Joe Flacco. We're talking about a play that Myles Garrett made or one of their defense makes.
And I agree with what you said where defense matters in the playoffs because you can go in as a team like Miami where they basically have to win every game of shootout. Let's just be honest.
Last year.
But the problem is if your offense has an off day, like Tua just has a bad day, what are you going to put your cap on? Like,
or if you have a couple of turnovers.
Yeah, like Joe Flacco, it is totally possible. He could throw 3 picks, like under 200 yards in a game, and yet the Browns defense does what it does, holds the team to like 5 points, 6 points, and they end up winning the football game because of it.
Safety. Why is that crazy?
Like, I know it's just an odd number, and I don't know why I said it, but that's why they can at least say, you know what, Flacco doesn't have to carry the team. It'd be great if he did, but if he has a bad game and we turn the ball over, at least we know our defense is still going to keep us in the game. Miami turns the ball over, ball game, it's over.
All right, let's go over to the NFC. Which team is more likely to pull off a first-round upset in the playoffs? The Rams or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? As of today, the Buccaneers would be scheduled to play against the Philadelphia Eagles. That would be the 4-5 matchup. The Lions would be slated to play against the Rams. These could all change. The NFC is much more up in the air right now than the AFC is with its seeding. But if these were to take place, more likely to pull off an upset, the Bucs or the Rams, Alex?
I mean, this isn't even a conversation. It's the Rams. As much as I think that the Bucs did a good job this year with what they have, and I made a statement on Friday that I'd give the comeback player of the year to Baker Mayfield, like, we're talking different conversations right now. Like, the Rams still have an offense that can compete, even if I disagree with it. Like, you still have Kupp, you've got Puka, and Kyren Williams is just going off right now.
He's the second most productive fantasy running back.
It's incredible. It's incredible because at the start of the year, I don't think anybody even knew who he was. So,
well, other than here in St. Louis.
Well, that's very true.
Proud of our guy.
I meant fantasy football wise, people didn't know who he was. But it's the Rams. They've still got Aaron Donald that can make plays. So I just don't think Tampa's going to win. They're going to be a fun story that they got in, but that's going to be it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the Rams. And I would have heard the argument for Tampa Bay going into last week because they've been playing pretty well, and Baker had looked pretty good. And then, like, that New Orleans Saints team stinks, and they laid an egg at home to them, and I'm out on the Tampa Bay Bucs. I think it is the Rams. Like, their defense isn't great by any means, and if they do turn the ball over, they would be in trouble. But their defense is fine. It can help keep them in the game. It can get a couple stops when they need to. The offense is legit, though. Kyren Williams has been an awesome running back. They've got 2 legitimate weapons in Puka and Cooper Kupp. And then don't sleep on Robinson. Robinson's played really well since Tutu Atwell went down. They've got a great offense. So I think that offense, if they get hot and Stafford gets into a rhythm, they could beat, I think, just about anybody outside of the 49ers.
Yeah, their problem is they're very likely going to have to take on the Niners in the divisional round based on where they're at seeding-wise. So I think their run will stop there. I'd be pretty surprised if they continued. But if they played against the Cowboys or the Lions for some reason, if the 7 seed ends up upsetting the Cowboys in the first round, for example, or if for some weird reason the Cowboys end up losing that division this week and the Eagles win it, and then the Cowboys and the Rams move, whatever it ends up being. If the Rams were to face against the Lions or the Eagles in the second round, that would be interesting to me. I think they could actually win that game, but it's unlikely.
By the way, why is it that Sean McVay's not getting more talk for Coach of the Year? Guys, I thought this team was going to win 5 games. They could get to 10 if they win this weekend.
Who is, as of today, the favorite to win Coach of the Year? Do you know? Is it Dan Campbell still?
I think it was Campbell, if I remember.
I would say Campbell's up there.
I'd give it to Campbell.
I really like what Sean McVay has done this year. I personally would actually vote for Stefanski with the Cleveland Browns. If you've got Joe Flacco at this age, and you're potentially going to win 12 games this year, given all of the injuries, like you said, Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson.
Who cares about Deshaun Watson?
But I think that he would be my Coach of the Year this year. Or John Harbaugh. I think you can make a case for John Harbaugh as well with the way that thing has come together. I think decisions with your coaching staff should be played into this, you know? Like, he hired the right guys, and he deserves credit for that. That being said, I would definitely go with the Rams here. They would be my team that is more likely to go on a run in the NFC's playoffs. All right, final thing here before we move along. Where do you guys stand on the rust versus rest conversation? There's going to be a lot of teams going into the weekend that are locked into where they're playing. The Browns are one of them. The Chiefs are one of them. The Lions, I believe, are locked into the 3 seed, barring something unforeseen. Where do you stand on this? Would you say play your starters, no doubt about it? Definitely rest your starters, play some of the... Where are you at on this? Rest versus rust.
I mean, some guys I can understand the rest, but, like, I'll just take the Kansas City Chiefs, for example. There ain't no way in hell I'm resting Patrick Mahomes right now.
You're playing him this weekend?
Yeah. I mean,
risking the injury.
Yeah, fine. Well, what are you going to do regardless, you need to be in the right mindset. I know he's Patrick Mahomes and you could figure it out, but there are some teams that I feel like you want to be in the right groove going into a playoff series, especially if you're not a 1 or a 2 seed. So I would lean more towards playing them. And look, if an injury pops up, then that's what's going to happen.
I think every situation's unique. Like the Chiefs one, I actually agree with Alex because they've played like crap lately. Yeah. And they got to find some kind of rhythm going into the playoffs. I know it's only one game and it's probably unlikely they find it, but at least give yourself a chance to find it. Baltimore, for example, a team that has found the rhythm, is playing very well. The thing that I've always thought of, and nobody does this, not very often at least, is I would have my starters play the first series and then pull them out. Yeah. Like it's the 4th game of the preseason, because then you're at least still in the rhythm of going through the pregame routine, and then you play that first series, and then you're just out. That way you're not just sitting there rusty. I like the idea of playing the first series. I know you're risking injury,
I wouldn't do it.
But I would still go with the first series and then pull my starters.
And Lamar Jackson might be another one of those guys, too, that falls into this conversation. Maybe tell him to stop running the damn ball, but I want him in the right mindset, and sitting around for 2 weeks might not be the best thing for him.
Yeah, I lean towards the rest. The Chiefs are banged up right now, dude. That's a big part of this conversation, is that they have a lot of guys, including Travis Kelce, who's clearly not right physically. I think Patrick Mahomes has been getting beat up in recent weeks, so I'm giving them full rest. Do not do anything this week. You're not getting the bye for the first time in a while. Go ahead and use this as your bye week and get rested up mentally, physically, emotionally, and let's get ready for the first round of the playoffs. I would do that if I'm the Chiefs. I would do it if I'm the Browns. I would do it if I'm the NFC and I'm the Lions, who are like 97% locked into the 3 seed as well. I would go ahead and rest as many of my significant starters as humanly possible. It's impossible to do it for everybody, but to avoid the risk of injury, that would be the way that I would play it personally. But I know there's some conversations that are taking place that other people disagree with that. So interested to hear the other side.
Hot take, if Blaine Gabbert plays well this week, he's my starting quarterback in the playoffs.
Coming up in 15 minutes, let's dive into the junk drawer. But next, what do the Canucks have that the Blues do not? And can the Blues follow their path to getting into contention as soon as next year? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my dentist, 100 West Dental. Already scheduled my next appointment in a couple of months, the 6-month checkup at 100westdental.com. And look, that's the best part, too. It's online scheduling. You don't got to call. You don't got to figure out both calendars. You look online, you could book it right there. But here's the thing. Everybody's got anxiety about going to the dentist because, you don't want to have the talk about how your teeth need to be brushed more and you're not flossing right, or you just don't want to hear those conversations. But here's the thing. It's important. All of it's important, making sure that you're taking care of your overall oral health, but also the preventative procedure. And what I mean by that is what Dr. Pryor and his team do is they look at everything for the long run, making sure that the early detection is taking place, making sure that your overall oral health is good now and will be good for the next few years. And that is very important to me because I had the people that didn't do that and lost 7 teeth. You've heard the story before. So go check out Dr. Pryor and his team. You'll find out why I call them the best over at 100 West Dental. And while you're there, mention my name, Alex Ferrario, and you'll get $1,000 off on an Invisalign package. So check them out, 100westdental.com, and get with the best at 100 West.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tomorrow night as they host the Vancouver Canucks, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitae, and then Joey will join Chris Carver for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find a road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoPlex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So the Vancouver Canucks are one of the best teams in the NHL this year, Alex. And I'm trying to figure out what they have that the Blues don't.
Talent!
Goalie.
T-Bone. The hell, man?
What?
Can't yell talent in a segment like this.
I didn't. I yelled goalie.
So you look at what they're doing right now. JT Miller's been awesome. 16 goals, 50 points in 37 games. He's basically their version of Robert Thomas, Alex Ferrario. And I'm just talking about a points perspective. I want to make this very clear. Some of these players are different stylistically than the guys that I'm going to compare them to on the Blues.
I was going to say, I think you compared Robert Thomas to the wrong player, but go ahead.
Quinn Hughes is a puck-moving defenseman, very young, very quick, good on the power play. That is your version of either Torrey Krug or Scott Perunovich, whichever you prefer. Elias Pettersson, 15 goals and 45 points so far this year. He is an all-around player.
That's
that
Robert
man
Thomas.
Is essentially
That's Robert Thomas.
Buchnevich.
Oh, my God.
Brock Besser, for you, is essentially your version of, we'll go Jake Neighbors.
Oh, yeah, Jake's put up 25 goals already this season?
Close enough.
Yeah, 12. You're right. That's the young man's goals.
Philip Ronick for them is what Colton Parayko is for you.
I would agree with
Alex,
that.
why are the Vancouver Canucks so much better right now than the Blues?
Well, obviously it's coaching. They got the right message with Rick
in all
Tocchet.
seriousness, what went right for them? Because a year ago, this is a team that fired its coach midway through the season. They finished the year essentially right at 500, 38-37-7. They were in the midst of kind of a retool, if you will, where they were really good in that bubble year where they went up against the Blues in the postseason. And since then, they haven't made it back. Why are they now back on track this year as one of the best teams in the West?
Well, I mean, first of all, it is Quinn Hughes. And, I mean, like, look at what Quinn Hughes has done over the last few years. Like, he's been good, but he hasn't been Norris Trophy good. And that's a big reason why. I mean, his numbers that he's putting up is contributing to all of the offense that they're scoring. I think Rick Tocchet is a massive piece to that puzzle. Like, when they fired Bruce Boudreau, or Bruce Boudreau, whichever one you want to call him, and brought Tocchet in, that was a very similar move to when the Blues did with Craig Berube in 2019, because you had a roster that was ready to win, but you needed a coach that could put the right mindset together. And Tocchet comes in, and he's got them all on the same page. Them trading Bo Horvat, I really think, had a massive piece of that puzzle. Bo Horvat was the captain for that team, but Bo Horvat might have been the captain of past teams and not the captain moving forward, and they put the C on Quinn Hughes, and he kind of took over from there. But that's really a lot of the piece of the puzzle. It's Rick Tocchet bringing in confidence. It's some of your best players playing like some of the best players in the NHL, and it's the confidence factor that goes into it. And I don't know why it all clicked, but man, did it click quick for that team, because in 1 year, you went from saying Vancouver might have to trade away Brock Besser, they might not be re-signing Pettersson, they might recycle this whole thing, to now talking about they're a Stanley Cup contender.
So the thing that I find really interesting about them is they are basically what the Blues used to be. Like, Rick Tocchet is doing with Vancouver what Craig Berube did here in St. Louis, which is breaking the brains of all of the nerds that exist.
It's discipline.
No, the nerds are trying to figure this thing out as like, whoa. So all of their expected numbers say this is the most average of average NHL teams. And yet, they continue overperforming their expected numbers every single night, dude. They're one of the best teams in the NHL, one of the best offenses in the NHL, despite getting outchanced by the opposition on a regular basis. If you're looking at the Corsi rating this year, they're below 50%. This is not supposed to be possible with the way that they're playing, but they have a very clear identity, and they have a great shooting percentage so far this year because they've got good players on their team, and they're taking advantage of basically every opportunity that's been presented to them. Is this going to regress at some point this year? Probably. They're probably not as good as their 24-10-3 record would indicate. And yet, They've been able to sustain it so far through the first almost 40 games of the regular season. And this is where it does remind me a lot, Alex, of that Blues team that we talked about going into the, I guess it would have been 2022 playoffs, where the Blues ended up losing against the Colorado Avalanche. Nobody believed in that Blues team in terms of the national numbers analytics guys. They all said it's just randomness and luck that has gone into a very fortunate Blues season. And locally, we're like, nah, man, they're just really good. This is just a good team. And that's what Vancouver has been. And I think our text line might have nailed it. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, it's very simple. The Vancouver Canucks have a very clear identity. They've all bought into the identity. They know how they have to win on a night-in, night-out basis. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. And I think that that's where the Blues are falling short right now. I don't think the Blues yet know who they are. I don't think the Blues can go into every single game and say, this is how we're going to win tonight. I think Vancouver goes into every single game and knows exactly who they are, how they're going to win, regardless of who the opposition is.
And that's the confidence factor. And I know that seems like such a lame thing to point out, but it's what happened in 2019. You had a group of guys who knew who they were and how good they were. They just didn't know how to put it on the ice and display it. Like, Vancouver might not be doing this if not for the early success that they had that recognized, like, hey, if we play this commitment to this style of hockey, we're going to win games. We're going to go out there and we're going to win. Even if it's not the prettiest, that's what this comes down to, and it seems crazy to throw that out there, but if you don't have the confidence in your game, if you don't have the ability to go into a hockey game and say, like, hey, we're down by a goal, but we're coming back into this one, you're not going to win hockey games. And the Blues got to figure that out still. They've got a lot of guys that when things go haywire, it all results in everybody's trying to do something else. Whereas the teams that have success, when things go haywire, it's let's focus in on what we do best here, guys. Pucks in deep, go to the net, and make those deflection plays. That's where a majority of these goals are coming from. It's not the highlight reel plays. Like Elias Pettersson is having a really awesome season, but so is Brock Besser. You know what Brock Besser scores? The way that Jake Neighbors has scored. You stand in front of the net and you pick up those ugly goals. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to win.
I think a lot of what's happening for them is just, it took time. It took time, man. It took time before Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes and Brock Besser, all of these guys came together to become the players that they ultimately needed to be, to fit into the roles that they needed them to play, to buy into exactly what it is that they're now being able to accomplish. Like, they needed time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you're seeing right now is with the Blues, it takes years before you become Brock Besser or Elias Pettersson. Like, you don't just immediately get into the league and become that guy. You can put up points. Brock Besser early on in his career, 55, 56, 45, 49, 46, 55 points. This year, boom, a legit breakout season in his 8th year in the NHL. He was a minus 20 on the ice last year. Yeah. And it's turned around for him. Elias Pettersson, that dude has been good since the day that he walked into the NHL. I remember that bubble season where we watched him against the Blues, and it was like, oh, God, this guy's going to be a problem for the Blues. And it was the same thing for Quinn Hughes. Mm-hmm. But it took some growing pain. It took some time before he really became a player that wasn't just a difference maker, but was one of the best in the league. And last year, it came together for him. And now he's being able to be that guy on a winning team. It's year 6 for Elias Pettersson. I think we're like 2 years away from that being the case for Robert Thomas, maybe even next year for Robert Thomas, for Jordan Kyrou. Jake Neighbors a couple of years away for him becoming the guy that he's ultimately going to be. Quinn Hughes, Freudian slip there. Scott Perunovich, a couple of years away before we get to him being that player. It just takes time for these guys to mature into the players that they're ultimately going to be for the Blues.
And I don't think it's crazy to comp a Scott Perunovich to a Quinn Hughes. I know we talked about it a little earlier, but you're never going to know if he is that until you put him up into that spot. And frankly, when Quinn Hughes took off and is having this season was when they acquired Filip Hronek from the Detroit Red Wings. And I know that sounds insane to say, but sometimes those types of players just need some stability. And I think, one, Scott Perunovich needs to have more confidence instilled in him, and I think he's getting that now with Drew Bannister. You're putting him in a bit better positioning, but they clicked the same way that I believe Colton Parayko and Scott Perunovich could click.
I hope they try it.
And I think that's the one piece that I'm like, because I agree with what you guys said. I don't think they have an identity, and I think you do need to give this some time to see them kind of mold into the players that you're hoping they become. The puck-moving defenseman that pairs with the stay-at-home guy. That's the one I think that you hope Perunovich is him. but you're gonna have to quit babying him and see what happens when you do try it, and you're gonna have to try it at some point because he's the guy for me that. You look at Parayko, I think he's finally solidified himself as that just clearly the number one defenseman. Like there were the last couple of years, there were spurts, but it wasn't consistent. This year it's been consistent. Now it's about finding his partner and can you get an offensive-minded one? And I think you're right. I think there is a chance that Scott Perunovich could be kind of like a Quinn Hughes. I mean, you're seeing it. The analytic numbers tell you about it. Now let's see what it looks like and see him try and mold into becoming that kind of player. And again, that's going to take 2 years, but you got to start throwing him up in the lineup with Colton Parayko to find out.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. One way that ends up happening is if they fall out of contention, and this schedule that's coming up is not going to help them in that regard, potentially at least. The Blues play against Vancouver tomorrow night. Alex will have your pregame coverage right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN for that one tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And then Carolina, Florida, the Rangers, Boston, Philly, and then Tua against Washington. A whole lot of legitimate playoff contenders coming up on this schedule. It does not get any easier from here. So the Blues going to have to play extraordinarily well to keep themselves in any kind of playoff contention over the next few weeks. Coming up next, we're diving into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. I couldn't tell if I was on the air that first time or not.
You were. You jumped the gun. I hadn't even pushed the button yet.
Yeah, man.
So let's dive into the jump
points when
drawer.
you're on the air.
Yeah.
Alex, would you ever consider celebrating New Year's twice?
What?
Going from one time zone to another in order to not only have the one celebration, but a second celebration to bring in the new year.
I love New Year's, but it's not a good enough holiday to celebrate it twice.
No?
That sounds exhausting.
So nice you don't want to do it
No,
twice?
No. There's only a few holidays that I'd like to celebrate twice.
T-Bone, would you consider, if you had the opportunity to do so, celebrating New Year's twice by going to multiple different time zones?
No. I'm with Alex. It's
stupid.
It's not all that
It
exciting.
sounds exhausting.
So,
Happy New Year.
you guys probably wouldn't sign up for this flight that took place over the weekend. A group of travelers attempting to turn back the clock to ring in the new year twice got a rude awakening. United Airlines offered a flight from Guam to Honolulu, which takes just over 7 hours and crosses the international date line. In effect, the passengers that are on board of this plane technically lose a day, which means that they could do the countdown to 2024 twice. Uh-oh, we hit a snag. The trip was meant to land in Honolulu at roughly 7 o'clock Hawaii time
darn.
on December 31st. But a lengthy delay forced the passengers to land in the wrong year. Uh-oh. So they started out in 2024, they end in 2024 because the flight was 30 minutes late past the 12 o'clock deadline. They were 6 hours behind due to a late inbound flight. So the individuals that were on this flight, Alex, they were excited about it. Great idea. Quote, too bad it got delayed. I was supposed to be on this flight. Double New Year just isn't happening anymore. Maybe next year.
Sounds exhausting.
If this was offered to you and you had zero money that had to go towards it, would you do it?
No.
You wouldn't even do it for free?
I would do it for free.
I would do it for free. I think that actually sounds like a really good
No,
time.
I'd like to just stay in one spot on New Year's. I don't really want to have to travel back and forth. Just so I can be like, oh, cool, New Year's, woo! What do I care? Like, people behind me,
cool. A good story.
people behind me shoot off fireworks on New Year's. I mean, it's annoying as hell.
I don't know.
Can we talk about that?
This is stupid.
What are we doing, guys?
Like, we don't.
I don't mind the fireworks.
It's stupid. Oh, yeah? Have a 2 and a 1-year-old and a dog that has all kinds of anxiety issues.
Yeah, dude. I'm done with
I'm
it.
in.
I've officially arrived at the place where I'm old man yells at cloud when it comes to
So stupid.
shooting off fireworks on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Guys, we can do this on the 4th of July. I'm all
Sure.
for it. That's the thing, right? The thing for 4th of July is fireworks. We don't need to be shooting that stuff off on New Year's Eve. Not at midnight.
It's a waste
That's
of time.
ridiculous.
It's a waste of time.
I did that a couple of years ago. Now, granted,
Why?
the caveat for it was my grandpa is a New Year's Day baby, and he always wants to. He's always wanted to shoot off fireworks.
So what's the-
So he did it for his
point?
70th or 80th birthday.
Can't you
Did you
just
just do
like
a couple, though?
Yeah, it was only a
That's
handful.
fine.
Yeah,
These things are
It wasn't
going
a lot.
off for an hour, man. I live out in St. Charles where we might as well be the wild west.
That part's a bit.
And
that
see,
I'd
this
agree
is
with.
some 618 just texted this in. Alex, my neighbors use any holiday for an excuse to fireworks. Everything. Halloween, freaking Arbor Day, we're shooting off fireworks. I just don't understand it. There's a fireworks tent by my house.
Don't you love to
that's
blow up
open
things?
24 hours a year. I don't know why.
24 hours.
24 hours every single day.
In just a year?
Just a year. Well, every year.
Every day.
Someone said better than shooting off guns. Absolutely better than shooting off guns. But why are we doing that on a holiday, too? Can we just stick with fireworks that were meant for firework holidays?
Well, every holiday's a firework holiday.
No, it's not.
Yeah, they make like orange fireworks for Halloween for spooky season.
Somebody said, guys, it's one night. It's their property.
It's not one night. It's every holiday.
It's better than barking dogs for 365 days
that
out
is
of the
true.
year.
No, because
That is true.
the dog barking is not going to wake up my kid.
Granted, I've gotten to the point where I kind of drown out the neighbor's dog, so it doesn't bother me anymore. But when I first did, yeah.
Have your kid wake up one time because of a firework and see how much you enjoy it.
It only happens, what, how many holidays are there? 10?
It's exhausting. I feel like it's only, At least out by us. I can't speak to you.
It's like
your
going
neck
down
of
to
the
my
woods,
neck of the
buddy.
woods. Jefferson County does it for
I
everything.
haven't noticed it for other holidays. Just New Year's Eve, which was really annoying this year. I hadn't even I'd totally forgotten that they do that for New Year's Eve out in St. Charles. Now that we have a kid, though, I was very aware of the fact that it was taking place outside.
I just don't understand. And they're bottle rockets too. It's not even like they're cool fireworks to look at.
I don't mind
Get
it for
better.
like New Year's Day and 4th of July, but outside of those two, like, it's harder for me to support it.
Somebody said, guys, I felt like Alex on New Year's Eve because I called the cops for the neighbors having their music too loud. I'm officially an old.
Wow.
Hey, man.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't do it for loud music. I did it because there were youngins that were breaking the rules.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. We're not
Props
talking
to
about
you.
this again. Coming up next. All right, so I was thinking about the Cardinals and how they're trying to win right now. Is there any comparison in recent years for a World Series winner that's trying to win the way that the Cardinals are? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We got to tell you about our friends over at Circa Sportsbook in Illinois because, guys, this is sports betting the way that it should be. You've probably gone out there, you're looking at all the different menus that exist for you, and you're thinking to yourself, man, are these the best odds that I can get? Maybe not. If you haven't tried out Circa Sportsbook in Illinois yet, you got to go download their app today. Download it on wherever your phone is, Circa Sportsbook Illinois. Get that app for you, and when you go over there, you can go ahead and check out their menu, compare it to anybody else. They recommend that, Alex, because they believe they're going to have the best lines available to you, especially with those tight money line splits that they offer.
And those tight money line splits, if you're a parlay kind of better like I am, you want to make sure you get the most money possible. And that's the other thing, too. They're keeping as little money as possible on those large bets. So if it's parlays, if it's the futures, if it's the tournaments that are taking place, compared to other sports books, you're making sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. And they don't limit people with their high limits like other books do. So go check them out. You'll also see the great customer service that they have. Circa Sportsbook app. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
The success of the Rays, I think, has infected everybody because there is this attitude now, and it's not just in Boston, it's in a lot of places, that you can patch it together, contend and get into the playoffs, and then maybe catch lightning in a bottle and win that way. And I still think there's a significant history that shows the best way to win is to spend. You know, certainly you have to draft and develop. That's always been true in any era. But I think that at some point you take it to an extreme and it goes a little bit too far.
That was Tony Maserati on Foul Territory yesterday. He covers the Boston Red Sox, Alex, and they were talking about the Red Sox trying to win with what is essentially the Rays model, but doing so in a big market. This is not something that took place as recently as 10, 12, 15 years ago. Boston is losing its mind right now at the way that the Red Sox are being operated. It started with the Mookie Betts trade, and it has continued to where we are today. Alex, they're not alone in that regard, though. You look around the league, a lot of teams are trying to win that way. They're trying to cut their costs to be able to win as much as possible, and they're looking at the postseason saying, it's very clear that's just a crapshoot. Look at the Diamondbacks. They got to the World Series despite clearly not being one of the best teams in the major leagues. So you look at how the Cardinals fit into all of this, and I was thinking to myself earlier today, man, the Cardinals are trying to do something that basically nobody else in the sport has done in recent years, which is win at the highest level possible by winning a World Series without tanking and without spending a significant amount of money. So you look at all of the teams that go about it the last decade or so, right? The Kansas City Royals in 2015, they had tanked for unintentionally 20 years. The Cubs tanked intentionally to be able to get good again, and finally by 2016, they broke the curse. 2017, the Astros win it. They tanked. 2018, the Red Sox win it. We don't think of them this way, but that season, they had the #1 payroll in the sport. 2019, Nationals, we all know they tanked. Their best players came from the fact that they tanked. The Dodgers spending crazy amounts of money. The Braves tank and then spend. The Astros tank and then spend. And then this year's Rangers, they didn't tank, but they did spend in a massive way. They go out and get hundreds of millions of dollars to their roster. Who's the team that has won that's doing it the way that the Cardinals are doing it? And does that mean you can't do it the way that the Cardinals are going about it, Alex?
I don't know a team that does it that way. Because I don't even know what the Cardinals model is. I know it's like drafting and developing these young players, but to get to the level that all of these teams were at, you're going to have to tank. They're going to have to be selecting top 5, top 3, or at least be really good at recognizing some of these players available. So I'm really not sure what their model is. I guess the best comp for a model would be what they did in 2011, but I think that model has faded away, and frankly, that model had a superstar and the best player in the game.
The Cardinals model was simply, do you have Albert Pujols? If you check yes, you can do the flow chart to you're a contender. If you check no, you've got the flow chart to you're not a contender. That was their model.
Yeah. So I don't think there is a model that the Cardinals are trying to accomplish. I think they're looking at teams that have had success in the playoffs, but success in the playoffs and winning a World Series are two very different conversations.
Yeah, I think maybe the team would be like San Francisco. Like, they've kind of been that model, but ever since that dynasty kind of broke up, they've had no clear direction, because I don't think they've really tanked, and they haven't really gone big in free agency. They've tried. Nobody wants to go there, but they never really have had that. But then they're not even the model I would say of success, because they've had so many turbulent years as well. And they essentially just said, you know what, we'll try the Rays model. You're right. I don't think there is a clear-cut team that you can look at and circle and say, this is what they are following and this is how it gets to success. I mean, you're right. I mean, it is as simple as, did you develop an internal star that was not just a star, but like the best player in the game? If you did, okay, yeah, then you can basically kind of find the way to contention. So basically what we're saying is that model would be then Walker develops into the superstar and then you're in a good position. Like, that's just really hard to ask in a lot of pressure.
So we've had a few people, and this is the comparison that I think I would make as well, but then you look at the actual numbers, and I don't think it follows up with what we're talking about here. A few people have brought up the 2010, 12, and 14 San Francisco Giants, and that's probably the closest thing, if we're being fair, to what the Cardinals are doing right now. The difference is, though, that team spends, man. Like, we don't think of them as being one of the top spenders, and they weren't top 5, but they were 6th. In 2012, they were 6th in Major League Baseball in payroll going into opening day. They finished the year, actually, that season as the 5th highest spending team in the major leagues. In 2014, they were 7th on opening day in spending. By the end of the season, they were 6th in spending. So the Cardinals aren't there. The Cardinals are like 12th to 14th right now in terms of what they're spending on their opening day payroll. So I don't even think you can really compare it to the Giants from 2010, 2012, or 2014. If you want to compare it to anybody, it is probably like the Cleveland Guardians. That's the closest thing that you've got. They got there in 2016. They have been a consistent enough winner, I suppose. But it's basically, hey, Cleveland's trying to do it this way. The Cardinals are trying to do it this way, and then there's everybody else that's doing it a different way. And again, this is not me saying that the Cardinals cannot win this way. It's just incredibly difficult because you've got these teams that are on the bottom end that are tanking to get the elite level talent while it's super cheap, and they're trying to catch lightning in a bottle while everything works. This is what the Orioles are doing. It's what the Astros did. It's what the Royals did. The Cubs did it. The Braves did it. Like, these teams tank and then get good really quick and then try to catch on to it, right? The Cardinals aren't doing that. And then you've got these other teams that are at the other end of the spectrum where it's the Phillies, the Braves now that are spending at a pretty high level, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mets. They're just spending like crazy and thinking that money is no object. And so they're getting all the top level money deals that are for 28-plus-year-old players. Cardinals aren't doing that. So the Cardinals are in the middle of both of these models, hoping to thread the needle with, Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado and really solid but not spectacular young players that are coming through the system. It's just an incredibly difficult way to go about things without getting into that top 10-ish in payroll. And this goes back to, you got to get aggressive with one more big move, man. It feels like every year, and who was it that said this with us? MLB Network, Mike Farron.
Yeah.
He said every year it feels like the Cardinals go one step. They're like right up at that line. If they can jump over it, they're a contender. And then they fade back. One step short of being an actual contender. And it feels like right now, if they don't go make that one move for a starter, they're at risk of doing that again. And it's that one extra thing that you do to put yourself not even over the top, but into the conversation. And I fear that they're unwilling to do it, Alex.
Well, and I also think that the reason they're unwilling to do that is because they have a model that isn't win the World Series. Their model is get to the playoffs and anything can happen. And I think there are a lot of teams that operate under that model because they don't have the money to spend and they're not willing to tank. So they said, well, all we got to do is get to the playoffs and then anything can happen. And sure, you can try that all you want, but the problem is when you've got the Dodgers and you've got the Yankees and all of these teams that are willing to spend the money or the teams that have tanked to build a super team, those are the ones you're going up against and you're not going to have success against. And I know anything can happen in the playoffs. Look at what the Diamondbacks just accomplished. But you've been operating under this model since post-2011, trying to find that next Albert Pujols. And sure, you've gotten to the World Series and had some really good teams, but you're not in the same atmosphere as some of the teams that win the World Series.
Yeah, and when you operate on that model of anything can happen, and look, I think there is some truth to that, to be fair.
Sure.
You can then ultimately, though, set yourself up to not build a postseason team. And that's where, like, I think Mo was asked about this recently, and he said, I don't know about, we got to get through 162 first. No, man, you can do both. You can build a 162-game team and also build a postseason
team.
team.
Look at what the Braves just did.
Exactly.
They just built for the postseason. They added Chris Sale not to help them 1 through 162. They can already win that division. They're the favorites to win that division. If not, they're going to make the postseason as a wild card team. You had Chris Sale to start 15 games of the regular season, and hopefully he gives you 5 in October.
Look at the Texas Rangers. They're going to have, right now, they haven't done a whole lot. I think their only move is, the Tyler Mahle deal, if I'm not mistaken. But you look at that rotation now and you go, what are they going to be throwing out there on opening day?
Opening day, you can make a case that the Cardinals have a better rotation than the Rangers.
But then you look post-All-Star break and you go, oh, wait, DeGrom's going to be back. Scherzer's going to be back. Tyler Mahle's going to be on the verge of coming back. And you go, oh, I see what you're doing here. You're just basically piecing it together saying, all right, can we just stay competitive in this window and then, boom, take off from there to where we're competitive in the back half? You get in. They may not win the division because of that, but they get in. They got the rotation to try and compete. So, and it's tough when you're in the Cardinals position because you're right. When you try to be kind of that mid-tier of spending, you always get those mid-tier free agents. And look, you can find some of those guys that end up doing better than what you project, but a lot of them end up being like overpays, like the Dexter Fowler deal, the Steven Matz deal, honestly, where you look at it and go, oh, wait, yeah, no, we probably shouldn't have done that. And then when you're at the draft process and you're drafting in the middle, you can find good guys in the middle of the pack. But it's a lot harder to find those guys than it is when you're drafting number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Those guys, for the most part, end up becoming legitimate studs. It gets a little tougher once you get outside that top 10 and always having to pick in the middle. You basically end up always drafting what the Cardinals are really good at, which is always developing that good complementary player and not getting the superstar. Exactly.
They end up developing a lot of Brendan Donovans, Matt Carpenters, which is a really good player, man. This is not a bad thing by any stretch. You need those guys. You need that player, and too many teams across the majors do not have that player. They fail to develop the connective tissue within a roster. But the Cardinals right now have the stars position player-wise. They have the connective tissue position player-wise. Hell, they might even have the connective tissue that is necessary in their rotation and in their bullpen. But they're lacking that star at the front end of their rotation. And if they don't go out there and acquire it either prior to the season or, let's be honest, they're not going to do this, but at the deadline is the other opportunity that you have to do that. So they're not going to do it.
He's right.
Then you don't allow yourself the opportunity to contend with these teams that acquired or developed, somehow got that player via tanking or via spending. Those other teams are giving themselves multiple opportunities to acquire that player. You have talent. The solid players that you've got that people maybe are overvaluing because they are young and cost controls, use that to go get the player that you do not have right now because you were unwilling to spend, because you were unwilling to tank. I don't blame you for it. I would want to tank here in St. Louis. There is a way to go about this that is aggressive, that does not put you back 10 years in your building process, but still allows you to contend in a meaningful level. I'm skeptical, highly skeptical, and growing more so by the day that the Cardinals are actually going to be willing to do it. All right, coming up next, let's play a game of Better to Forget It. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Alex, better to forget it. The Cardinals will sign Ryan Helsley to a contract extension, and it will end well here in St. Louis. We'll get into that next year on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. You give us a scenario, we will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's start out with this one, boys. Yesterday, I was reading Derek Gould's chat over in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website, stltoday.com. It is more than worthy of your time. There was a lot of nuggets in there, but this is just one of them. He said, quote, when asked about if there's a contract extension candidate that stands out for him, he said, quote, Helsley stands out as a compelling, unexpected candidate for an extension. The team gives him what he wants in guarantees, and he gets what he's looking for. It could be a good exchange, end quote.
Man.
Alex?
What wild times we live in where the Cardinals wouldn't pay him his arbitration money, and now they're going to give him his extension.
Bet it or forget it, the Cardinals extend Ryan Helsley this offseason and are happy that they did it by the end of the deal.
Oh, forget that one then, because the Cardinals won't be happy when they extend him. I would bet that they will extend him.
You think?
Yeah. That screams I mean, we always know that the Cardinals give out extensions, but for some reason they don't give it out to the guys that we think they should give it out to. Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, those players. Instead, they'll give the extension to a Ryan Helsley, and I don't think you'll be happy with it because, as T-Bone likes to say, one of his rules in life, you don't give long-term deals out to pitchers.
Yeah. I would do it. I'll bet it if this ends up being a 2 or 3 year deal. I think Ryan Helsley is a totally solid and worthwhile bet for the next couple of seasons. I would not do this if it's like a legitimate long-term extension. If we're talking 5 years, I'm not doing that with any bullpen arm not named. I don't even know if there is one. Maybe Josh Hader would be the only thing that I would even consider, and that's just to get the average annual value down with him. But if it's a 2 or 3 year deal, I actually will bet this. I think it could end up being a good deal for the Cardinals if they decide to go this route.
Homer.
I would forget it. I don't understand the need to do it because I don't think he's ever going to outprice himself. I mean, he's making what, $3 million this year. So he has a great year. He'll make $7 million. You can't afford a $7 million
It's really
reliever.
buying out that extra year. Yeah. If you get an extra season with him,
But, like, who cares?
I mean, the Cardinals end up getting him potentially for like $10 million when he could get 20 on the open market if he's as good as he was last year.
The problem, though, is the bullpen arms are so volatile, I wouldn't want to do that.
Totally fair.
So that's why I don't think they'll do this. I forget this. I think they're going to extend Paul Goldschmidt. That they may end up living to regret, but I think that's the only extension they do this offseason.
Which one's riskier, Paul Goldschmidt extension or Ryan Helsley 3 year deal?
What's my deal on Goldie? 3 years?
I don't think you should do
3 years, $60 million.
I don't think you should do either of those.
He gets the Yadier Molina contract.
I would actually say it's probably still riskier on Helsley because he's dealt with injuries. And again,
the money's much less. Money would be like a 3 year. Let's say it's a 3 year, $30 million deal for Helsley versus a 3 year, $60 million deal for.
I think if
Goldie.
When Goldie declines, not if he declines, when Goldie declines, he'll still decline, and I think he'll still be a solid player. If that extension goes haywire for Helsley, it probably means he wasn't healthy and he never got his dominant stuff again. And that would be more of a concern than like, sure, you're overpaying for a good player, but it's still Paul Goldschmidt. And instead of like hitting second and third and you're hoping for 30 home runs, he's more of like a little, not a leadoff hitter, but like an on-base guy that's hitting like fifth or sixth or hits second still and just gets on base, not hitting for home run power.
Alex, what do you got for us?
Bet it or forget it, guys. Michael Penix Jr. will win the college football championship game and go into the top 10.
I'm going to bet it. After seeing some of the breakdowns that people way smarter than I am have put out on what he did in the college football playoff semifinal game. Dude, it was one of the best games we've seen by any quarterback in college football this year. Maybe the single best game that we've seen by any quarterback. And if he does that again, even to a lesser degree against this Michigan defense, oh boy, that will be something that speaks loudly to observers, specifically with the NFL. So I'll say bet it. I think he ends up going, I would say right now, top 15. But if I have to say top 10, I think quarterbacks tend to get pushed up. I'll go for it. I'll say bet it.
I'm going to forget it because I don't think they win the championship game. Now, I think he could still push his way into the top 10 with a great game, but I think he's probably going to go in that 10-15 range if I had to guess. And I think he'll probably stay there because I think Michigan wins this one. So I would forget it, but I definitely see the path towards it. He plays really well. He can move himself up there. He plays just good, and they end up winning. I can see him push himself up there.
I don't think he goes in the top 3. But I think Atlanta's going to be the best option for him. Like, if I'm Atlanta, that's the player that I would be targeting for 9th overall. Now, hear me out. This is tinfoil for you guys. If you're Chicago and you're done with Justin Fields, but you like Michael Penix Jr., and I don't know why you would do this, but let's just say you think he projects better than all these other guys. Do you trade that first overall pick, get assets for that, and then trade Justin Fields to get more assets?
No.
And draft Penix Jr. And
if you think Michael Penix Jr. is the guy, capital T, capital G, you take him at number 1.
Yeah.
You don't allow any potential shenanigans to take place around you. You just go get your guy. You don't mess with the quarterback, man. If you think that this player is special and he has unique abilities that you can get the best out of, and he is just a flat-out better player for you right now than Justin Fields is and will be much better long-term, then you draft him.
Jeez, man, stop yelling at me.
Sorry.
It's tinfoil, okay?
I like the theory. I like the idea, but at that position, like if it's a receiver and that's what you're going to do, I think that the Bears should trade down
To get Marvin Harrison Jr.? That's where I'm at, too.
Jr. There are also a lot of other receivers in this draft. So if for whatever reason something happened in front of you where somebody else takes Marvin Harrison Jr., you just go get one of the other 6 guys that's going to go in the first round this year that are all really, really good. Not Marvin Harrison, but really good nonetheless. But for the quarterback position, I'm not messing with it.
Yeah, same. Guys, bet it or forget it. I'm not saying this year, but at some point in Scott Perunovich's career with the Blues, he will put up a 40-point season.
Oh, bet it. I hate to say this, but I don't think it's going to be with the Blues. I think he's going to be with somebody else.
Oh, no, another Dunn/Wallman?
I just don't want. Yeah, I don't want to go down that path, and I don't want to think so negatively here. But he's an unrestricted free agent, and
I thought he was an RFA.
No, he's unrestricted because you already did the RFA with him, and you gave him the 1 year, and he's got the certain amount of play time and the years in the league, and you've got Krug and Letty, and
says he's an RFA.
Really? Because I thought
Cap
Friendly's an RFA. Because I thought Curbs had told me that he was an unrestricted free agent.
I mean, they could have it wrong. It's possible.
Yeah. Well, regardless. Beyond that RFA status, because you're probably only going to go 1 year with him again, I'm very concerned that they'll look at this and say, "No, we've already got 2 of him. We'll stick with what we've got. Move." I mean, they're playing Scott Perunovich again on the second power play unit. At least they were practicing it today. And Krug was on that first one.
I'll bet it. I think he does it here. Guys, let's get through a couple of these before we get to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues on the other side. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. Guys, Bet It or Forget It, the leader in the NL Central will be under 500 at the All-Star break. I'm going to forget this. I think somebody ends up emerging that's better than that, even if they're not going to be like a 101 team.
Yeah, I don't think the Cardinals will be there, but I think like a Cincinnati Reds by the All-Star break will be above that.
Yeah, I would forget this too because you get to the All-Star break, it may not be like 10 games over 500, but somebody's going to be like a game or 2 above 500. I can't see. I don't even think the AL Central last year had a team below 500 at the All-Star break.
Better to forget it. The Cardinals surprise everyone and sign Josh Hader.
No, forget it. No.
Good one.
Mo learned after the Cecil deal. I hope.
No, he didn't. They're going to give Ryan Helsley money.
Well, I think it'd be fun. I don't think it would be a smart move, but I think it'd be fun. Better to forget it. Noah Hannafin will be a Blue by the trade deadline.
I'm going to forget it. I think he'll be a Blue in the offseason, or at least the optimistic side of me hopes he's a Blue in the offseason.
I'd forget it, too. If it's going to happen, I think if they're going to make a big move like that, it'll be in the offseason.
I think Calgary's going to hold on to him.
I'm going to forget it as well. I don't think he ends up being a Blue either at the deadline or in the offseason, unfortunately. Yeah. And guys, better to forget it, Caleb Williams will still be the #1 overall pick in this year's NFL draft.
Bet it. I think it's going to be the mistake. I think not as bad as Bryce Young has been, but I think it's going to be close to the Bryce Young move to where Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and I think Michael Penix Jr. are going to be better than him.
Yeah, I would bet it. I don't know if he will be a bust because I think he'll have a lot of the Kyler Murray trajectory to where it is. You see the flashes, but there's all kinds of like question marks of is he a good leader? Can he play at the NFL level? And now we're seeing Kyler, what is this, year 5? 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that range? Where he's playing pretty well under a new head coach.
I'm going to bet this. I do think it's going to be close, though. I think Drake May is a guy that you're going to hear a lot of buzz about over the next 3 months or so. You're going to start seeing some of these NFL draft analysts that are like, hey, I know none of you guys watched Drake May, which is true. None of us watched North Carolina, let's be honest. Yeah. But, man, is this kid good. I watched some highlights of him yesterday. Woo-hoo-hoo. He's a fun player, guys. That dude he's unique in the way that he goes about things. He's a playmaker. He's fun, man. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're getting to our BK and Ferrario Rewind. But coming up next, Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and I've got some exciting news for all the men out there. Make a change in your life as we get into the new year. Go to Victory Men's Health, VictoryRx.com. That's the place to go. They've launched a new telehealth site. Again, it's called Victory RX. Man, you can go there, get prescribed that ED medication that you have been looking for. They've made this process so easy. Man, you go to the site, again, VictoryRx.com, and they'll do your entire consults all via text. They've already treated thousands of men in their standalone locations, so you know this is a trusted place. Victory Men's Health has done that, and now they are giving men from all over easier access to their #1 selling ED medication. This is going to come in the form of a chewable tablet. It has active ingredients with both Viagra and Cialis, and because of that, because it is a chewable tablet, you don't have to worry about the food or the drink that you had earlier in the day, and it's going to work quickly for you. So go to VictoryRx.com. That's VictoryRx.com, and you'll play hard.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tomorrow night as they host the Vancouver Canucks. And we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. And then Joey will join Chris Gruber for Puck Drop at 7. News out of the NFL, Carson Wentz will start this week for the LA Rams. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We're trying to locate our friend, the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. He joins us each and every Wednesday, right around this time here on BK and Ferrario.
He just needs another week off from BK.
But Alex, while we're waiting on Kerbs, I did want to ask you about a story that was posted earlier today over on The Athletic, because Scott Wheeler and Jeremy Rutherford got together to write about Dalibor Dvorsky, the top prospect that the Blues drafted this year in the top 10. And they compared him to Ryan O'Reilly. They said he's got some Ryan O'Reilly qualities based upon what they have seen from him so far. Alex, he had a really good tournament in this juniors championship. He's also been really good since coming over to Canada for Sudbury. What are you seeing right now from him? What are you hearing about him? Should Blues fans be excited about Dalibor Dvorsky and where he's at right now in his development curve?
I mean, I absolutely think people should be excited about this kid. So to BJ's point, like, he's out of the World Junior Tournament now because his team lost in that quarterfinal round to Finland, but he scored 3 goals and 6 points in 5 games for him, and that's his 3rd World Juniors tournament, and he's eligible to play in 1 more. So, like, that's massive for a player like that. And I know a lot was made about him going from Sweden to juniors hockey because he wasn't playing well in the Swedish league. Whatever the case may be, but with Scott Wheeler's article and with what we've seen and what I've seen so far in this World Juniors tournament, he is very noticeable amongst his peers. And at least from just talking to people in this, and I'm not an expert in terms of evaluating prospects.
I would consider you to be.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. But reading stuff and talking with them, when the player stands out above his peers in his own age group, is when you know you've got something special.
Have you seen what he's done in the OHL?
Yeah, he's more. I mean, he's
scoring a goal per game. Forget a point per game. He's at 18 goals and 34 points in 20 games.
He's almost a 2-point per game type of player. And again, that is against players amongst his age group. And the other part that people don't talk enough about, because everybody's excited about the offense that Dalibor Dvorsky provides, but the reason that they call him Ryan O'Reilly is because he's very good on the defensive side. Like, this could be somebody you talk about Selke conversations when he gets to the NHL, because he's just as responsible on his own end as he is in the offensive zone. And I think he was at 63.8% in the World Junior Tournament in terms of faceoffs. His coach was in the article that Scott Wheeler and JR put together in junior hockey and for Slovakia, and they all said everybody that's on the teams with him, and a lot of these guys are 19, 20 years old, are watching what he's doing. So Blues fans should be excited about this. Now, I don't think this is going to be next year. I'm sure he'll be at training camp next year and it'll be noticeable. But I think by next year, you're talking about him being in the American Hockey League for the first half of the season. And by midway point next year, halfway through, you're probably talking about some sniffs at the NHL level.
Yeah, Army was quoted in this article, and again, you could read the full thing. It's worth your time over on The Athletic. Jeremy Rutherford put this together. Doug Armstrong said, you could either see Dalibor Dvorsky back in Sudbury next year, or we could push him to the AHL, or he might make it to the NHL. Who knows? If you take where the young players are drafted, when they come into the league, and when they're important players, you know this isn't going to be just next year. It's just not realistic. History shows that. It was much easier for a guy like Robert Thomas to come into a veteran-laden team in 2018. It's more difficult to do that on a team full of younger players. You see teams that are doing that now, and I think it's really hard for them to learn in this league. Men are not going to back off. They have a job to do, and their job is to win games, and they don't care if you're 18 or 19 years old. If they can exploit you, they're gonna do it. So, as I said, we plan on having the next couple of years where we're gonna be pushing through a retool with some of these veteran players, and then we'll implement some of the young players, but to rush those guys for the wrong reasons is not a recipe for success.
Yeah.
I love the way that he's going about that. I think it's the exact correct way to do this, man. You don't want to push these players into spots where they're going to fail and then potentially set them back. We talk so often about how important it is to have confidence in this league. And I do think this is one of the reasons why we're not seeing Scott Perunovich playing up in the lineup. We are seeing Scott Perunovich having success in the role that he's playing right now. And I think Scott Perunovich, and he's admitted as much, we talked about this with JR the other day, Scott Perunovich lacked some of that confidence in previous seasons when he got up to the NHL level. So if I'm the coach here, and listen, they've got better ideas of this than I do, and they're clearly doing this, I'd say, you know what? Let's keep Scott Perunovich in this role for now. Let's make sure that he is completely confident in who he is as a player before we change the role that we're putting him into, so he can grow into that player. If the Blues were trying to contend this year, maybe they push that a little further. But because this is a year where they are still a part of that retool, I think you're going to see guys that are growing into those roles, and it takes a little longer than what you might like on the outside looking in.
Well, and the other thing, too, is like you don't put in a young player unless mentally he can handle everything that's going to be coming their way. And that's so I just went and looked at this because I didn't realize kind of how they utilized Ryan O'Reilly in Colorado his first year, but he was 18 years old. He only had 26 points, but he played all but one game. He was used as a fourth liner. I mean, he averaged about 16 minutes a night, and that was on a team that was not stacked with veterans, but they had like guys Milan Hajduk and they had Paul Stastny. So Ryan O'Reilly was a young player that was just kind of thrown into the role, and you have to figure it out as you go, kind of like Jake Neighbors has been. But mentally, if that player is ready to take on that workload and go up against some of the top guys, then you give him a shot. And if it doesn't work, he's got an entry-level contract. He's already signed. So if it doesn't work, you just put him in the minors. And if it doesn't work in the minors, then you put him back to juniors, because you do have that trial period before he goes back to junior hockey.
He's Alex Ferrario. You'll hear him on pre, post, and intermission for the Blues tomorrow night. Blues versus the Canucks with pregame coverage tomorrow starting at 6 o'clock right here on your home of the Blues. Coming up next, we're diving into the BK and Ferrario Rewind. Alex, I want to ask you, why do you think it is that this year's free agency market is taking so long to develop for Major League Baseball? We'll hit it next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. If you've missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It is all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, this has been a slow-moving market in Major League Baseball's free agency, to say the least. And it's gumming up the trade market as well. Really, the only big move for a starter that we've seen thus far has been the deal that sent Tyler Glasnow to the LA Dodgers. Other than that, for all the talk of, you know, the front-end starter, Shane Bieber, that could be available, Milwaukee's guys that could potentially be available. You look at the Mariners, man, none of that has happened. And the reason why is kind of puzzling to me. I don't totally understand why this has taken as long as it did. I thought that we'd have to wait until the Yamamoto and the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes were over. But, man, those have been over for a hot minute now. It's not the thing that's delaying this process any longer. And yes, some of this is the Scott Boras clients, but he doesn't represent everybody that's on this free agency market. Alex, of the top 20 free agents based on the Athletics rankings, 12 of them remain unsigned.
Jeez.
It is January 3rd. Pitchers and catchers report in like 6 weeks, I think. In your mind, can you think of anything that would explain why this is taking so long, why the market appears to be so delayed this year?
Prices. It's the only thing I can think of. That teams are looking at what Jordan Montgomery is asking, Blake Snell is asking, Marcus Stroman is asking, and saying, well, I'm not paying that. Why would I pay that? And the reason that you're not going to the trade market is it seems like they're waiting, at least general managers, front offices are waiting to see when the prices go down. It's that game of chicken where, no, I'm not going to pay that. And the player says, well, I'm not going to sign with you. And say, okay, well, we'll see who's left standing when the music stops. And before I go to the trade market, why would I give up my assets if this guy's going to drop his prices $10 million? So I don't know if we see the trades other than if a team just says, bleep it, I'm not going to wait around for a Jordan Montgomery or a Blake Snell anymore. But I got to imagine it's the prices. If the market value for Jordan Montgomery is sitting close to $20 million per year, teams are probably like, I'm not paying that.
I think it's prices, and I think it's also because of the volatility of the guys that are available. Like, think of Cody Bellinger. You really want to lock that guy up on an 8-year, $250 million deal when he hit like 195 2 years ago, and even though he had a great numbers this year, the advanced numbers will tell you this may not be sustainable. You look at Blake Snell. Sure, yeah, he won a Cy Young. Well, walking 5 guys per 9 innings. Jordan Montgomery, I think he's still viewed as a 3 across baseball, which is weird to say, but I think that's the way he is viewed. I listened to the Roundtable podcast yesterday, and they were saying that they were hearing that he is viewed as a 3. And I think people are still looking at the market going, why would I give Frankie Montas $16 million? I don't want to do that. But that's the cost of pitching now, which is funny because that's the problem baseball created itself. These teams created this own problem of lack of innings. By the way, they've developed guys to now 150 inning pitcher is now worth like $12 to $15 million.
And I think the cost of trading is more expensive too.
It is because of the cost of pitching. Because the cost of pitching is so high in the free agency market, the guys that are cost controlled, that have already either signed contracts that are locked in years ago that have now become values by them just sitting there, or if the guys are cost controlled by being on the entry-level deals, whatever it is, they're cheaper than what you're going to have to go pay for a similar caliber of pitcher on the free agent market. Therefore, it's worth a lot in terms of your prospect currency. Somebody on the text line said, guys, hasn't it been this way for a few years? Players don't sign until sometime right before or even into spring training because teams get desperate at that point and have to overpay. That's the case for a couple of players every year. It is typically not the case for this many. What's unique about this offseason is that Montgomery, Snell, Bellinger, Chapman, Hader, Kershaw, Stroman, J.D. Martinez, Teoscar Hernandez, Soler, and Merrifield are all still available. That's weird.
And the part that's weird is, so like the starting pitching and the position players, typically you would think that you would see more movement. The one that you're not seeing any movement in, and this is the one that shocks me, is the bullpen arms.
There's been nothing.
There's been like 5 bullpen arms that have signed.
And like it's a couple of guys that were at the top end of the market, like the mid to top tier. And then a few of the guys that are like at the very bottom tier of the market, and then everybody else remains available. And this is why, like, we're talking a lot about the starting rotation and whether or not the Cardinals are actually going to do what is necessary to fix it, because most of those players that could have fixed it are off the market at this point in time. we're not talking as much about the bullpen and my fear of that not being fixed because everybody's still available.
Yeah.
Whatever you thought they were going to do heading into free agency, you probably still feel that way because almost every player that could have fixed that hole is still out there, ready to go for them. If you wanted them to go get Jordan Hicks, guess what? That guy's still out there for you.
Yeah.
If you wanted them to go out there and get, Robert Stevenson? Yeah. Still out there, ready to go, available. Everybody is still out there. So it's a weird offseason, man. And I have said in the past, I'm not sure that it's totally necessary for them to create any kind of deadline to be able to kind of kickstart things. I'm starting to wonder if that might be necessary. And I don't know how you do it, and I really don't think that the players would ever accept it, but we're getting close to a place where it might even be good for the players.
Yeah.
Because there's going to come a point in time, we'll see which direction that ends up going, but the text line said you got to break if you're a team and give them the money that they're worth. Do you, though? Or are the teams going to stay strong and say, we're fine. Nobody else is trying, so why don't we go ahead and wait here? And you're going to eventually sign a 1-year contract with somebody, and you'll come crying back to us because you want to contend.
It's such a bad look for baseball.
Like
to wait so long for moves to take place, and then you're just basically playing stalemate. Like, for fans that, like the general fan that wants to get excited for it, it's such a bad look to waste this much time because both sides don't want to agree upon what they feel like they're deserved.
And I don't mind that baseball's offseason moves slower than others. I really don't. I think that it's good for the sport to have like the ebbs and the flows of the hot stove season, right? Instead of being like hockey where 2 days in,
boom,
it's
done.
over. It's a pop gun offseason, right? And in the NFL, it's kind of the same. Baseball's different, and it's always been different, and I have no problem with that. But the difference has typically been, hey, by winter meetings, you really start heating things up, and that's about a month and a half into the offseason where you now have all of this action.
By January, we should be done talking about where the big guys are going to sign.
Yeah, by the time you get to New Year's, typically you have a couple of free agents that remain and maybe a trade or two that's still out there. You don't have the entire market that's still waiting to move for the most part, and that's what's different this year. So I don't know how they fix it. I don't know if they can fix it. I don't know if maybe this is just a one-off in terms of a weird offseason with a lot of different factors. Sure. But something is weird this offseason, and it is playing into why the Cardinals have not made the moves that we've all been waiting for. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. You can always check us out on YouTube as well, youtube.com/101ESPN. The studio cam's powered by the Air Alliance team. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.